Hey everyone. Welcome back to Gringotts Hub. Get ready for an amazing tale. What if Harry was summoned by Gringotts at age 8 and discovered he was the Lord Potter-Black-Slytherin? Smash that like button and subscribe for more. Here we go. Chapter 1. The Goblin's summons. The letter arrived at 7:30 on a Tuesday morning, which was inconvenient because Harry Potter was in the middle of burning the bacon. Not on purpose, of course. He'd been frying bacon since he was 6, standing on the little wooden stool Uncle Vernon had grudgingly shoved toward the stove with his foot, and he was actually quite good at it by now. But today the grease had popped and caught him right across the knuckles, and he'd yanked his hand back, and in that half-second the bacon had gone from golden to black on one side. Boy! Vernon's voice from the dining room was like a foghorn stuffed inside a walrus. That better not be what I think it is. It's fine, Harry called back, scraping the burnt rashers onto a paper towel and laying fresh ones in the pan. His knuckles throbbed. He ran them under the cold tap for exactly 2 seconds, any longer and Vernon would hear the water running and call him lazy. He was plating the eggs when the owl smashed through the kitchen window. Not tapped. Not pecked politely. The bird, enormous, coal-black, with eyes like molten copper, exploded through the glass in a shower of fragments that Harry barely managed to duck. It landed on the kitchen table, talons gouging the wood, and fixed Harry with a stare of such intense, unblinking focus that he forgot about the bacon, the burn, and the sound of Vernon's chair scraping back in the next room. There was a letter in its beak. Not paper, something thicker. Parchment, cream-colored and heavy, sealed with a blob of dark red wax stamped with a symbol Harry didn't recognize. Crossed swords behind what looked like a gemstone. The owl dropped it on the counter beside the eggs, gave Harry one more imperious look, and launched itself back through the broken window without waiting for a reply. Harry stared at the letter. Harry stared at the window. Glass was everywhere, on the counter, on the floor, in the eggs. What was that noise? Vernon filled the kitchen doorway like a purple-faced cork in a bottle. His eyes went to the window, to the glass, to the eggs, and finally to the letter in Harry's hand, which Harry had picked up without consciously deciding to. "What," Vernon said, very quietly, which was always worse than the shouting, "is that?" "An owl just, give it to me. It's addressed to me." The words came out before Harry could stop them. He'd turned the letter over and seen it, written in angular, precise script that looked like it had been carved rather than written, Mr. H. J. Potter, the cupboard under the stairs, number 4, Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey. Vernon's face went from purple to white. Not angry white. Scared white. Harry had seen Vernon angry 1,000 times, but he'd only seen him scared once before, the time Harry had somehow ended up on the school roof when Dudley's gang was chasing him. Vernon had looked at him with that same expression. Like Harry was something dangerous. "Give me that letter, boy. Now. It has my name on it. I won't ask again." Vernon lunged. His meaty hand closed around Harry's wrist, the one with the burn, and Harry gasped. The pain was sharp and sudden and something inside his chest seemed to crack open like a furnace door. Every light bulb in the kitchen exploded. Petunia screamed from somewhere upstairs. Vernon released Harry's wrist like he'd been electrocuted, stumbling backward into the doorframe. In the sudden dimness, morning light filtering through the shattered window, Harry stood very still, breathing hard, the letter clutched against his chest. "Don't touch me," Harry said. His voice sounded strange. Older. Steadier than an 8-year-old's voice had any right to sound. Vernon opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. He looked like a fish that had been slapped. Harry took the letter and walked past his uncle, who flinched away from him, actually pressed his back against the wall as Harry went by, and into the cupboard under the stairs. He pulled the door shut, sat on his thin mattress in the dark, and broke the wax seal. The parchment felt warm under his fingers. The words seemed to glow faintly, though that might have been his imagination. Might not have been, given the light bulbs. "Dear Mr. Potter, you are hereby summoned to Gringotts Wizarding Bank, Diagon Alley, London, for an urgent matter regarding your hereditary estates, titles, and financial holdings. Our records indicate that multiple irregularities have been detected in the management of your accounts, requiring your immediate presence and blood verification. As the last surviving blood heir of the ancient and noble house of Potter, your attendance is not a request but a legal obligation under Article 7 of the Gringotts Ministry Compact of 1403. A transport will be provided at precisely 9 a.m. on the date of this letter's receipt. No preparation is necessary. No accompaniment is required or desired. Be ready. Yours in gold and blood, Senior Account Manager, Ironclaw, Department of Ancient Estates, Gringotts Wizarding Bank. Harry read it 3 times. He understood about half of it. Gringotts, a bank. Wizarding, so magic was real. He'd always known, hadn't he? The light bulbs. The roof. The time Aunt Petunia had shaved his head and it had grown back overnight. The glass at the zoo that had vanished while Dudley was leaning against it. Magic was real, and apparently he had money, and apparently someone had been doing something wrong with it. He looked at the battered watch he'd fished out of the bin last year, one of Dudley's discarded birthday presents, too unfashionable to keep. 8:43. 17 minutes. Harry pulled on his least-torn jumper, still 3 sizes too large, one of Dudley's cast-offs, and stuffed his feet into his trainers. He didn't have anything to pack. He didn't own anything worth packing. At 8:59, the cupboard door began to glow. Not the wood, the air in front of it. A seam of golden light appeared, like someone was cutting through reality with a very precise knife. It widened, lengthened, and became a doorway, except instead of the Dursleys' hallway, it opened onto a vast marble corridor lit by floating chandeliers of crystal and fire. Harry could hear Vernon thundering down the stairs. "Boy! What are you doing in there? What's that light? Open this door right." Harry stepped through. The golden doorway snapped shut behind him, cutting off Vernon's voice mid-syllable. The silence that replaced it was extraordinary, deep and cool, like the inside of a cathedral. Harry stood on a polished marble floor veined with gold, and the air smelled of metal and something ancient, like stone that had been underground for a very long time. "Mr. Potter." The voice came from ahead and below. Harry looked down and found himself face to face with a creature about 3 feet tall, dressed in a suit of dark leather armor inlaid with silver thread. Its face was sharp, all angles, like someone had carved it from flint. Long fingers, pointed ears, dark eyes that reflected the light like a cat's. It was not smiling, but it was not unfriendly. It looked professional. "I'm Harry," Harry said, because he didn't know what else to say. "I am Ironclaw," the creature said. "Senior Account Manager for the Potter estate. Follow me, and do not touch the walls." Harry followed. He didn't touch the walls. The corridor was long, and they passed doors of dark iron and bronze, each marked with symbols Harry couldn't read. Other creatures like Ironclaw passed them, some in armor, some in what looked like bankers' suits, all of them glancing at Harry with expressions ranging from curiosity to what Harry thought might be amusement. One of them, a massive specimen with a scar running from his forehead to his jaw, stopped dead and stared at Harry with something that looked like shock. "Is this," the scarred one began. "Not now, Grip Hook," Ironclaw said without breaking stride. They turned a corner, descended a flight of stairs carved from living rock, and arrived at a door larger than the others. It was black iron, and the symbol on it matched the seal from the letter, crossed swords behind a gemstone. Ironclaw placed his palm flat against the door. It swung open without a sound. The room beyond was not what Harry expected from a bank. It looked like a war room. A long table of dark wood dominated the center, covered in scrolls, ledgers, and what appeared to be a shallow stone basin filled with silvery liquid. The walls were lined with weapons, swords, axes, spears, all gleaming and clearly not decorative. And at the head of the table sat the oldest goblin Harry had seen yet. This one was different from the others. Where Ironclaw was sharp and businesslike, this goblin radiated authority the way a bonfire radiates heat. He wore no armor, just a simple black robe with a chain of gold around his neck. His eyes were pale, almost white, and when they fixed on Harry, the boy felt them like a physical weight. "Director Ragnarok," Ironclaw said, "may I present Mr. Harry James Potter?" The old goblin studied Harry for a long moment. Harry studied him right back. He'd learned at the Dursleys that looking away first meant you were afraid, and being afraid meant you got hit. "You're smaller than I expected," Ragnarok said. "I get that a lot," Harry said. Something flickered in those pale eyes. "Sit down, Mr. Potter. We have a great deal to discuss, and very little of it is pleasant." Harry sat. The chair was goblin-sized, but it adjusted to him, growing taller, the seat widening, as if the wood itself was alive. He tried not to look startled, and almost managed it. Ironclaw took a position beside Ragnarok and opened one of the ledgers. "Mr. Potter, are you aware of your status in the wizarding world?" "I didn't know there was a wizarding world until about 20 minutes ago." Ironclaw and Ragnarok exchanged a look that Harry couldn't quite read. It was quick, barely a flicker, but there was something heavy in it. Anger, maybe. Or something worse. "Then we will start at the beginning," Ragnarok said. "Your parents, James and Lily Potter, were murdered on October 31, 1981, by a dark wizard who called himself Lord Voldemort." Harry felt the words hit him like stones dropped into still water. Murdered. He'd been told they died in a car crash. Drunks, Vernon had said. No good layabouts. "They weren't drunks," Harry said quietly. Ragnarok's pale eyes sharpened. "No. They were not. Your father was Lord James Charles Potter, head of the ancient and noble house of Potter. Your mother was Lily Potter, née Evans, one of the most gifted witches of her generation. They were killed defending you." "Defending me from what?" "From Voldemort. He came to your home to kill you specifically, Mr. Potter. The reasons are unclear. What is clear is that when he attempted to use the killing curse on you, a curse that has no counter and no survivor in recorded history, it rebounded. Voldemort was destroyed. You survived with nothing but that scar on your forehead." Harry's hand went to his forehead without thinking. The lightning bolt scar. He'd had it as long as he could remember. "In the wizarding world," Ragnarok continued, "you are famous. You are called the boy who lived. Every witch and wizard in Britain knows your name." Harry sat with that for a moment. Famous. People out there, magical people, wizards, knew his name, thought of him as some kind of hero, and meanwhile he'd been sleeping in a cupboard and cooking bacon for a family that called him boy and freak. He didn't feel angry yet. That would come later. Right now he just felt very, very still inside. "You said there were irregularities," Harry said. "With my accounts." Ragnarok smiled. It was not a warm smile, goblins didn't really do warm, but it was approving. "You cut to the heart of it. Good. Ironclaw." Ironclaw turned the ledger so Harry could see it. The numbers meant nothing to him, he didn't know what a galleon was, but he could read the names and dates. "Following your parents' death," Ironclaw said, "a man named Albus Dumbledore presented himself to Gringotts as your magical guardian. He carried a document, supposedly signed by your parents, granting him authority over your person and your estates until you came of age." "Supposedly. We have since conducted a thorough audit. The document is a forgery." The stillness inside Harry deepened. "So this Dumbledore, he's not supposed to be in charge of my stuff." "He is not. Your parents' will, which was sealed by the ministry and never executed, names Sirius Black as your godfather and primary guardian, with Frank and Alice Longbottom as secondary guardians. Dumbledore is not mentioned." "Then why is he?" "Because he is Albus Dumbledore," Ragnarok said, and the way he said the name carried the weight of decades of carefully managed fury. "Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot, Supreme Mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards, headmaster of Hogwarts School. He is, in many ways, the most powerful wizard in Britain. When he presents a document to a bank and says, "This is legitimate," people do not question him. But you're questioning him now. We are goblins, Mr. Potter. We were embarrassed. We do not forgive that. Ragnarok leaned forward. Over the past 7 years, Dumbledore has authorized withdrawals from your trust vault totaling 47,000 galleons. In your currency, that is approximately £235,000. Harry's mouth went dry. He didn't fully grasp the magical equivalent, but he understood £235,000. That was a house. That was several houses. Where did it go? Various accounts. An organization called the Order of the Phoenix. A family called Weasley, small amounts, likely for appearances. And a substantial sum into a vault registered to one Albus Dumbledore under the name, Emergency War Fund. He stole from me. Yes. And the trust vault, that's not even the main vault. Ironclaw turned a page. The Potter family vault contains approximately 14 million galleons in liquid assets, plus properties, artifacts, and investments. The trust vault is a small allowance set aside for your school expenses. It is the only vault Dumbledore had access to. 14 million galleons. Harry didn't know the conversion, but he could see by the way even Ironclaw said it that it was an enormous sum. There's more, Ragnarok said. And this is where it becomes complicated. Ironclaw, the basin. Ironclaw stood and retrieved the shallow stone basin from the center of the table. Up close, Harry could see that the silver liquid inside it wasn't liquid at all, it was moving, swirling in slow patterns, like mercury with a mind of its own. This is an inheritance basin, Ironclaw explained. It requires 7 drops of your blood. It will tell us, definitively, what you are heir to. We have suspicions, strong ones, but goblin law requires blood verification. You want me to bleed into a bowl? 7 drops. No more. Ironclaw produced a small silver knife, ornate and clearly ceremonial. Harry looked at it, looked at the basin, and held out his hand. The cut was quick, a thin line across his palm that stung less than the bacon grease. Harry held his hand over the basin and counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The drops hit the silver surface and vanished like rain into a lake. Then the liquid erupted. It fountained upward, not splashing, but rising in controlled streams that wove through the air like living calligraphy. Words formed, glowing gold against the dim room, and Harry read them as they wrote themselves into existence. Harry James Potter born, July 31, 1980 father, James Charles Potter, deceased, mother, Lily Jane Potter née Evans, deceased, heir by blood, the ancient and noble house of Potter, Lord, unclaimed, heir by blood and magical adoption, the ancient and most noble house of Black, Lord, unclaimed, heir by blood, Peveril line, and right of conquest, the ancient and noble house of Slytherin, Lord, unclaimed, magical core, severely suppressed. 3 binding blocks detected. Health status, malnourished. Evidence of repeated injury. Magical healing recommended. Alert, magical guardian, Dumbledore, unauthorized. Recommend immediate removal. The golden words hung in the air, pulsing gently. Harry read them twice. The goblins were silent, not the polite silence of people waiting for him to finish, but the stunned silence of people who'd expected a bonfire and gotten a volcano. 3 houses, Ragnarok said finally. His voice was different now, softer, almost reverent. In over 1,000 years of Gringotts operations, I have never seen a single wizard hold claim to 3 lordships. The Black Lordship, Harry said. How? You said my godfather, Sirius Black, your grandmother was Doria Black, a daughter of the main line. That gives you blood claim. But more importantly, Sirius Black performed a blood adoption ritual on you when you were 6 months old, a godfather's right, common among the old families. It made you his heir in the eyes of blood and magic. Since Sirius Black has been imprisoned in Azkaban without trial for 7 years, without trial? Without trial, Ragnarok confirmed, and there was a cold satisfaction in his voice, like a predator showing its teeth. He was never convicted. Never even formally charged. He was simply put away. Which means his titles and seats have been in limbo, managed by a regent, Lucius Malfoy, who married into a minor black branch. Malfoy has been spending black gold and wielding black political power for 7 years, all without legal authority. Because I'm the real Lord Black. If you claim the ring. Yes. Harry looked at the glowing words again. Right of conquest. And Slytherin. That's because what? I beat Voldemort. The House of Slytherin passes by blood through the Peveril line, to which you are connected through your father. Voldemort was the last Lord Slytherin by blood descent from a cadet branch. When his killing curse rebounded and destroyed him, magical law recognized you as the conqueror. Blood claim and conquest right, combined. It is unprecedented. And the bindings on my magic. The 3 blocks. Ironclaw's expression could have cut glass. Placed deliberately. Recently. Within the last 7 years, given their composition. They are suppressing approximately 80% of your magical core. Someone did this to me on purpose. Yes. Was it Dumbledore? We cannot confirm the caster without a full diagnostic ritual. However, only a wizard of extraordinary power could place binding blocks of this sophistication on a child with your magical potential. There are perhaps 3 wizards alive capable of it. One of them is Albus Dumbledore. Harry sat back in his chair. The wood creaked under him, adjusted again, as if sensing his tension and trying to support him better. So. His parents were murdered. He was famous. He'd been stolen from the magical world and hidden with people who hated him. Someone had sealed away most of his magic. Someone had stolen his money. Someone had made sure his godfather rotted in prison without a trial. And the man responsible for most or all of it was the most powerful wizard in Britain, and everyone trusted him. Harry was 8 years old. He was small for his age, underfed, wearing clothes that didn't fit, and sitting in a goblin bank that existed in a world he hadn't known about an hour ago. He should have been terrified. He should have been crying. He was angry. Not the hot, explosive anger that made lightbulbs pop. This was something else, something cold and deep and very, very patient. It sat in his chest like a block of ice, and it clarified everything. It made the world simple. I want to claim all 3 lordships, Harry said. Right now. Ragnarok looked at him for a long time. Then he reached beneath the table and produced a wooden case, ancient and dark, bound in iron. He opened it. Inside, resting on black velvet, were 3 rings. The first was gold, set with a deep red ruby. A stag was engraved on the band, rearing, proud, antlers like a crown. The Potter ring. The second was silver, heavier, set with a black diamond. The Black family crest, 2 greyhounds flanking a shield beneath a chevron of stars, was carved into the metal with microscopic precision. The black ring. The third made Harry's breath catch. It was dark iron, almost black, and the stone set into it was a deep, living green, an emerald, but deeper than any emerald Harry had ever seen in pictures. A serpent was etched into the band, eating its own tail. The Slytherin ring. It seemed to pulse, and Harry could have sworn he heard a faint hissing sound. The rings will judge you, Ragnarok said. If they reject you, they will burn. If they accept you, they will bond to your magic permanently. Given the suppression blocks on your core, I should warn you, the bonding process may interact unpredictably with the bindings. Good, Harry said. Maybe they'll break them. Ragnarok's pale eyes widened slightly. Then he laughed, a rough, grating sound, like rocks grinding together, but genuine. "You are either very brave or very foolish, Mr. Potter. My parents were brave, and they died. I'll try brave and smart. Then take them. Potter first." Harry picked up the gold ring and slid it onto the ring finger of his right hand. Heat. Not burning, not rejection, but warmth, spreading from the ring up through his hand and into his arm, filling his chest, wrapping around his heart. For a moment Harry felt like he was standing in a sunlit room, and he could hear distant laughter, a man's laugh, deep and joyful, and a woman's voice saying something he couldn't quite make out, and the feeling of being held by someone who loved him completely. The ring resized itself to fit his finger. The ruby flared once, bright as a coal, and then settled. "The House of Potter accepts its lord," Ironclaw said formally. There was a tremor in his voice. Harry picked up the silver ring. This one was different. Cold, sharp, like plunging his hand into ice water. But beneath the cold was something fierce and wild, a howling darkness that wasn't evil but was absolutely dangerous. Harry felt it test him, pushing against his mind, his will, looking for weakness. He pushed back. The cold receded. The howling softened to a low, steady growl, like a guard dog recognizing its master. The ring settled on his left ring finger. The black diamond caught the light and threw fragments of rainbow across the table. "The House of Black accepts its lord." Harry reached for the Slytherin ring. The moment his fingers touched the iron, every candle in the room went out. Darkness, total, absolute, and then light, but not from the candles. From Harry. Or rather, from something inside Harry, something that had been locked in a cage for 7 years and now felt the bars weakening. The Slytherin ring wasn't warm or cold. It was alive. Harry felt it in his blood, in his bones, in the scar on his forehead. It was ancient and vast and it knew him, not as a boy, not as a hero, but as something that went deeper than any of that. It recognized his blood the way a river recognizes rain. The ring slid onto the middle finger of his right hand, and Harry heard a voice, not in his ears but in his mind, speaking a language that should have been incomprehensible but wasn't. Section Welcome home, young one. Section The binding blocks shattered. There was no other word for it. Harry felt them go, 3 constructs of foreign magic wrapped around his core like chains, and they didn't dissolve or fade. They broke. Violently. The energy that erupted from inside him was like a dam bursting, and the room paid the price. The stone basin cracked down the middle. The scrolls on the table burst into flames that burned green and gold. The weapons on the walls rattled in their mounts, and several of them, swords, specifically, launched themselves from the wall and embedded point first in the stone floor, forming a circle around Harry's chair like an honor guard. Harry was on his feet, though he didn't remember standing. The air around him shimmered with visible magic, waves of it, pouring off his skin, tasting of lightning and old forests and something vast. His scar blazed white-hot for one terrible second, and he heard a distant scream that wasn't his own, a high, cold shriek of rage and surprise from something far away. Then it stopped. The candles relit themselves. The green-gold flames consuming the scrolls guttered out, leaving the parchment singed but intact. The weapons stayed where they were, a ring of ancient goblin steel around the boy who stood at their center, breathing hard, with 3 rings glowing on his fingers. Harry looked down at his hands. His vision was perfect, the blurriness that had plagued him since he could remember was gone. He could feel his body changing, too. Not dramatically, he wasn't suddenly taller or muscular, but the persistent ache in his bones from years of poor nutrition was fading, as if his magic was finally doing what it had always wanted to do, keeping him alive and whole. "Well," Ragnarok said. He was standing. So was every goblin in the room, Ironclaw and 2 guards who had burst through the door, weapons drawn. The director of Gringotts was staring at Harry with an expression the boy had never seen on anyone's face before. It was respect. "The House of Slytherin," Ironclaw said, and his voice was barely a whisper, "accepts its lord." Harry sat down. His legs were shaking. Not from fear, from the sheer overwhelming sensation of being full for the first time in his life. Not full of food, full of himself. Of his magic, his power, his birthright. Everything that had been stolen from him was flooding back, and it was almost too much. "The blocks are gone," he said. "We noticed," Ragnarok said dryly. He waved a hand, and the guards lowered their weapons. "Mr. Potter, Lord Potter, I should say now, your magical core is stabilizing at a level I have not seen in a living wizard. You are, to put it plainly, extraordinarily powerful. And you have been kept deliberately weak." Dumbledore. "Almost certainly. I want him removed as my magical guardian. Immediately. That is already done. The moment you claimed the Potter lordship, any guardianship he held became void. You are lord of an ancient and noble house. In the eyes of magical law, you are emancipated. I'm 8. You are Lord Potter-Black-Slytherin. Age is irrelevant. The magic recognizes you. The rings recognize you. The law recognizes you." Harry looked at his hands again. 3 rings. They'd shifted, the Potter ruby on his right ring finger, the Slytherin emerald on his right middle finger, and the black diamond on his left ring finger. They looked too large and heavy for a child's hands, but they fit perfectly. They felt like they'd always been there. "What else should I know?" Harry asked. "Everything. Don't spare me." Ragnarok settled back into his chair and steepled his long fingers. "Very well. Ironclaw, the full accounting." Ironclaw produced a fresh ledger, this one thicker than the first, bound in green leather. "Lord Potter. Your combined holdings across 3 houses are as follows. The Potter family vault contains 14,200,000 galleons, plus a property portfolio including Potter Manor in the Welsh countryside, a townhouse in London, and a cottage in the village of Godric's Hollow, currently in ruin. The Black family vault contains approximately 9 million galleons, though this figure is preliminary, as significant unauthorized withdrawals have been made by the current regent, Lucius Malfoy. Properties include number 12, Grimmauld Place in London and Black Island in the North Sea. The Slytherin vault." Ironclaw paused. He looked at Ragnarok, who nodded. "The Slytherin vault has not been accessed in over 300 years. Our records indicate a balance of approximately 22 million galleons, along with an unknown quantity of artifacts, books, and items of historical significance. Additionally, as Lord Slytherin, you hold a founding claim on Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry." "A founding claim?" "Hogwarts was built by 4 founders, Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin. As heir to Slytherin, you hold a quarter ownership of the school, its grounds, and its wards. This has not been relevant for centuries, as no Slytherin lord has existed. It is relevant now." Harry filed that away. "And my godfather. Sirius Black." Ragnarok's expression shifted, something darker passing through those pale eyes. "Sirius Orion Black was arrested on November 1, 1981, one day after your parents' murder. He was accused of betraying your parents' location to Voldemort and of killing 13 people, 12 muggles and a wizard named Peter Pettigrew, with a single curse on a public street. He was taken to Azkaban prison, where he remains. You said there was no trial. There was no trial. No formal charges. No evidence presented. No defense offered. He was simply imprisoned by order of Bartemius Crouch, then head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, with the apparent approval of Albus Dumbledore. Can the goblins find out if he's actually guilty? We are already looking into it. The irregularities in the Black accounts raised flags during our audit. It was, in fact, the audit of your 3 estates that prompted this entire meeting. What we have found so far is deeply troubling. The Potter will, which would have named your guardians and likely cleared Black, was sealed by the Wisengamot at Dumbledore's request. Sealed, Lord Potter. Not executed. Not read. Your parents' final wishes were locked in a vault and ignored. Harry's cold anger sharpened another degree. I want that will unsealed. As Lord Potter, you have the right to demand it. We will file the motion today. And Malfoy, the one spending black money, Lucius Malfoy, Ragnarok said, and his tone could have frozen Mercury. A snake in expensive robes. He claimed regency of the black seats on the Wizengamot, your political body, and has been using black gold and black political influence for his own ends for 7 years. He has no legal right. With your claim established, his regency is void. Then void it. Send him a notice. Formal. Official. I want him to know that every canute he took is being tracked. Ragnarok's smile this time was genuine, sharp-toothed and predatory, the smile of a goblin who had just found a wizard worth doing business with. It will be done within the hour. And Dumbledore, is a more delicate matter. Ragnarok held up a hand. Do not mistake me, Lord Potter. The Goblin Nation bears no love for Albus Dumbledore. But he is powerful, connected, and beloved by the magical public. Confronting him directly and immediately would be unwise. He would reframe the narrative, a confused child, manipulated by goblins, making decisions he doesn't understand. Then what do you suggest? Preparation. You have been kept ignorant and weak for 8 years. We can address both of those things, but it will take time. Months, at minimum, before you are ready to face the wizarding world on your own terms. Ragnarok leaned forward. The Goblin Nation is prepared to offer you something we have not offered a wizard in 4 centuries. Training. Education. Not the watered-down curriculum taught at Hogwarts, but true magical instruction, goblin war magic, ancient rune craft, a clemency to protect your mind, and the political education you will need to navigate the Wizengamot. Why? The question was blunt, and Ragnarok appreciated blunt. Because you are Lord Slytherin. Because you walked into this bank and treated us as people, not as servants. Because you are powerful enough to change things, and we have been waiting for someone worth investing in. And because Dumbledore and his ministry have stolen from us 2 years of fees and interest on accounts they mismanaged, and we want our gold back. Harry almost smiled. Almost. So it's not charity. Goblins do not do charity, Lord Potter. It is an investment. And I believe you will prove to be a very good one. Harry looked at the 3 rings on his fingers. At the swords embedded in the stone floor around him. At the crack in the inheritance basin and the scorch marks on the scrolls. He was 8 years old. He owned 3 houses, 45 million galleons, a quarter of a school, and a burning need to know the truth about everything that had been done to him and why. I have conditions, Harry said. Name them. First, I'm not going back to the Dursleys. Ever. If I have a manor house, I'll live there. Potter Manor can be restored and warded within the week. The house elves have been maintaining it in stasis. I have house elves. 17. They have been waiting for you, Lord Potter. Quite eagerly, from what I understand. Harry didn't know what a house elf was, but he'd deal with that later. Second, Sirius Black. I want a full investigation. If he's innocent, I want him out of that prison. Already underway. Third, I want a full accounting of everything Dumbledore has done as my guardian. Every withdrawal, every decision, every letter he intercepted. I want to know the shape of what he built around me, because I need to know how to tear it down. Ragnarok was very still. You believe he intercepted letters? I'm famous, you said. The boy who lived. And in 8 years, no witch or wizard has ever contacted me. No one's come to check on me. No one's written. Either the entire magical world forgot I existed, or someone made sure their letters never arrived. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Harry had ever heard. Iron Claw, Ragnarok said quietly. Add male ward detection to the diagnostic ritual. Priority 1. Yes, Director. Harry nodded. Then we have a deal. Gringotts manages my estates. Gringotts trains me. And when I'm ready, I walk into the wizarding world and take back everything that's mine. He stood. The swords around him shuddered, then pulled themselves from the stone, floated into the air, and resheathed themselves on the walls, one by one, as if they'd never moved. Ragnarok stood as well. He extended his hand, not a human handshake, but something else, his fist, closed, knuckles out. In goblin custom, he said, this is how we seal a pact between equals. Fist to fist. Harry met it. His small fist against the goblin's scarred one. The contact sparked, a brief flash of gold light at the point where their knuckles touched. May your gold flow and your enemies bleed, Lord Potter, Ragnarok said. May your vaults overflow and your blade stay sharp, Director Ragnarok. Ragnarok's eyes widened. Who taught you the goblin response? Harry blinked. Nobody. It just felt right. Ragnarok looked at him for a long moment, and something shifted in the old goblin's face, something deeper than professional interest, deeper than investment potential. The Slytherin ring, he murmured. It carries ancestral memory. Salazar Slytherin was one of the few wizards who ever learned our customs. He shook his head slowly. You are going to be very interesting, Lord Potter. The next few hours were a blur of activity, purposeful, efficient, and relentless. Ironclaw led Harry deeper into the bank, to a medical wing Harry hadn't known existed. The goblin healers were brisk and thorough and utterly horrified by what they found. The malnourishment was obvious. Harry was nearly 2 stone underweight for his age, with bone density issues and signs of repeated untreated injuries. Small fractures in his left wrist that had healed wrong. Scar tissue on his back from where a belt had connected too hard. Vitamin deficiencies that had stunted his growth. The lead healer, a fierce goblin woman named Silverthorn, catalogued everything with the dispassionate fury of a professional who has seen something unforgivable. The magical blocks were preventing his core from performing natural healing, she explained to Ironclaw, though Harry was listening. She didn't talk about him as if he weren't there. Goblins, he was learning, didn't do that. Now that they're broken, his body will begin repairing itself. I'm accelerating the process with a nutritional potion regime and a bone-mending draft. He'll need 6 months of proper feeding and rest before he's at full physical health. And my magic? Harry asked. Silverthorn looked at him with something approaching warmth, or as close as a goblin healer got. Your magic is fine, Lord Potter. Better than fine. It's your body that has catching up to do. Think of it this way, you've been trying to pour an ocean through a garden hose. Now the hose is gone, but the ocean needs somewhere to go. Training will help. Your magic needs to learn your body, and your body needs to learn your magic. They've been strangers for 7 years. They also found the male wards. 3 of them, layered around Harry's magical signature like invisible nets. Every owl sent to Harry Potter had been redirected to a location Ironclaw traced to a cottage in the Scottish Highlands, a property registered to Albus Dumbledore. Harry didn't say anything when they told him. He just nodded and asked them to keep building the file. Later, after the potions, after the diagnostics, after a meal that Harry ate slowly because his stomach wasn't used to real food, Ironclaw brought him to the Potter family vault. They traveled by cart. The cart ride was the best thing that had happened to Harry in 8 years, plunging through underground tunnels at absurd speeds, the wind whipping his hair back, the darkness broken by flashes of crystal and flame. Harry laughed out loud, and the sound surprised him. He couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed. The vault was enormous. Mountains of gold coins, galleons, Ironclaw explained, with the smaller silver sickles and bronze nuts mixed in. But the gold was almost an afterthought compared to what else was there. Shelves of books with titles Harry couldn't read yet. Racks of jewelry, his mother's, Ironclaw said quietly. A wand case containing 6 wands from 6 generations of Potters. Portraits, currently dormant, but they would wake when placed in a magical home. And a stack of letters, bundled in twine, sitting on a small table near the vault entrance. What are those? Harry asked. Letters from your parents. Left here for you, to be delivered on your 11th birthday. Given the circumstances, the director authorized early release. Harry's hands shook when he picked up the first one. It was addressed in handwriting he'd never seen but recognized somewhere deep in his bones, messy, energetic, slanting to the right. Dear Harry, if you're reading this, it means your mum and I aren't around anymore, and I'm sorry for that, mate. I'm so sorry. We tried. I promise you we tried. There are things you need to know. Don't trust anyone who tells you to trust them blindly, that includes Dumbledore, and yes, I know how that sounds coming from me. Your mum's been worried about some of the things he's been asking us to do. I don't want to write too much here in case this letter falls into the wrong hands, but listen, the prophecy isn't what Dumbledore says it is. There's more. Find the memory I left in the Slytherin vault. Yeah, I know, I'll explain in person if I can, but if not, the vault will let you in. You're a Peverell, son. You're more than even Dumbledore knows. Be brave. Be smart. Be kind. And don't let anyone tell you what you're supposed to be. You decide that. I love you, Harry. More than everything. Dad. Harry read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully, put it in the inside pocket of Dudley's too large jacket, and wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He didn't make a sound. The tears fell, and he let them, and when they stopped he took a breath and turned back to Ironclaw. I want to see the Slytherin vault, he said. My dad left something there. That can be arranged. But Lord Potter, it is after 6 in the evening. You've been here for 9 hours. Perhaps, tomorrow, then. Harry looked at his hands. The rings caught the torchlight, ruby, diamond, emerald. Where am I sleeping tonight? Gringotts has guest quarters for valued clients. You will be safe here. The wards are older than your ministry and considerably more effective. Then I'll stay. The guest quarters were small but immaculate, a bed with clean sheets. Harry ran his hand over them 3 times, marveling at the softness, a desk, a wardrobe stocked with clothes that fit him, actual clothes, in his actual size, and Harry stood in front of the mirror for a full minute just looking at himself in a shirt that didn't hang to his knees, and a window that shouldn't have existed underground but showed a view of moonlit mountains. Goblin enchantment, Ironclaw said, noticing Harry's stare. The view is real, it's a live image from the Goblin Highlands. Director Ragnarok thought you might prefer it to stone walls. Tell the director thank you. I will. Good night, Lord Potter. Harry. Ironclaw paused at the door. Call me Harry, the boy said. At least when we're not in a formal meeting. I've had enough of people calling me things I'm not. Something shifted in Ironclaw's sharp face. It might have been surprise. It might have been something else. Good night, Harry. The door closed. Harry sat on the edge of the bed, the clean, soft, warm bed, and pulled his father's letter from his pocket. He read it one more time. Don't let anyone tell you what you're supposed to be. You decide that. Harry looked at the rings on his fingers. 3 houses. 3 legacies. 3 bloodlines converging in a skinny, scarred, underfed boy who'd been sleeping in a cupboard 12 hours ago. Dumbledore had built a cage around him, a cage of ignorance and weakness and lies. Had stolen his money, blocked his magic, hidden his parents' will, let his godfather rot in prison, and placed him with people who treated him like vermin. And the wizarding world had let it happen because Dumbledore's name was magic in itself, because people trusted the old man's kindly smile and twinkling eyes. Harry wasn't angry anymore. He was past anger. He was in the cold, clear space on the other side of it, where everything was sharp and everything made sense. He would learn. He would train. He would grow into his power and his titles and his name. And when he was ready, when he walked into the wizarding world for the first time, it would not be as the boy who lived, the orphan, the pawn. It would be as Lord Harry James Potter-Black-Slytherin. And he would not be kind about it. Harry lay back on the bed and closed his eyes. For the first time in memory, he fell asleep without fear. Deep below the bank, in the ancient vaults where even the goblins rarely ventured, 3 doors shuttered on their hinges, 1 gold, 1 silver, 1 iron. The magic of 3 houses had found its master, and the walls of Gringotts hummed with a frequency they hadn't known in 1,000 years. Somewhere in Scotland, in a tower office filled with spinning silver instruments, one of those instruments exploded. Then another. Then a third. Albus Dumbledore leapt from his chair, staring at the wreckage, the monitoring charms tied to Harry Potter, shattered beyond repair, and for the first time in a very long time, the most powerful wizard in Britain felt something he barely recognized. Fear. And in a small, clean room with a view of moonlit mountains, the boy who had caused it all slept peacefully, 3 rings glowing softly on his fingers, dreaming of stags and serpents and the sound of his father's laugh. Chapter 2, The Lord Awakens. Potter Manor announced itself before Harry could see it. He felt it first, a pulse of warmth that rolled through him the moment the Gringotts portkey deposited him on a gravel path surrounded by oak trees older than the bank itself. The sensation started in his rings, all 3 of them flaring with heat, and then moved inward, through his bones, his blood, his magic. Like the house knew him. Like it had been waiting. "The wards are recognizing you," Ironclaw said from beside him, straightening his leather coat after the portkey's spin. "Potter Manor has been in stasis for 7 years. The house elves maintain basic preservation enchantments, but the full ward scheme requires a blood lord to activate. Walk forward. The path will respond." Harry walked. The oaks parted like a curtain, and there it was. Not a mansion. Harry had seen mansions in the magazines Aunt Petunia hoarded. This was something else entirely. Potter Manor was old. Old in the way mountains are old, in the way rivers are old. 3 stories of grey stone covered in climbing ivy, with tall windows that caught the morning light and threw it back in fractured rainbows. Towers at each corner, not ornamental, but functional, with narrow arches slits that spoke of a time when the Potters had needed to defend their home with more than magic. A courtyard spread before the entrance, paved in flagstone, with a fountain at its center, dry now, but carved with the same rearing stag that adorned Harry's Potter ring. The front doors were massive. Dark oak, iron-banded, carved with runes Harry couldn't read yet but felt resonating in his chest. As he approached, they swung inward on their own. Then the house elves appeared. 17 of them, as Ironclaw had said. They materialized in the courtyard in a ragged line, blinking in the sunlight, wearing clean tea towels stamped with the Potter crest. They were small, barely reaching Harry's waist, with enormous eyes and bat-like ears and expressions that ranged from trembling hope to outright disbelief. The one at the front of the line was older than the rest, with ears that drooped slightly and eyes the color of tennis balls. He took one look at Harry, at the rings on his fingers, the scar on his forehead, the messy black hair so like his father's, and burst into tears. "Master Harry," the elf said, his voice cracking. "Mippy has waited. Mippy has kept the manor safe. Mippy promised Master James," he couldn't finish. He pressed his hands to his face and sobbed. Harry knelt down. The gravel bit into his knees, but he didn't care. He was at eye level with the elf now, and he reached out and put a hand on Mippy's shoulder. "You knew my dad. Mippy served Master James since he was a boy. And Mistress Lily. Mippy was there when, more tears." Several of the other elves were crying now too, a quiet chorus of sniffles and hiccups. "Thank you," Harry said. "For keeping the house safe. For waiting." Mippy looked up at him with those enormous eyes, tears streaming, and something in his expression shifted. The grief was still there, but beneath it was a fierce, absolute devotion, the look of someone who has found their purpose again. "Master Harry is home," Mippy whispered. Then, louder, to the other elves, Master Harry is home." The effect was instantaneous. The fountain behind Harry erupted, clear water shooting into the air, catching the light, the stag carving coming alive with spray and mist. The ivy on the manor's walls rippled, and flowers bloomed along its tendrils, white and gold. The windows blazed with light as rooms inside the house illuminated themselves, one by one, like a giant waking up and opening its eyes. Harry felt the ward settle around him like a cloak, warm, protective, immense. He could feel the boundaries of the property in his mind, a map drawn in magic. The oak forest. The grounds. The gardens. A lake he couldn't see from here. A Quidditch pitch. Greenhouses. And beneath it all, deep in the bedrock, ward stones that thrummed with 7 centuries of Potter magic. "The manor has bonded to you," Ironclaw said. Something in his voice was almost soft. "Almost. You are its master. No one enters these grounds without your permission. No one." Harry stood and faced the open doors. Morning light poured through them, illuminating a grand entrance hall of polished wood and stone. A staircase swept upward. Portraits lined the walls. He could see figures stirring in their frames, turning toward the doors with expressions of shock and joy. He took a breath and walked inside. The first week was a hurricane. Goblins arrived daily through a permanent portkey link Ironclaw established between the manor and Gringotts, a concession so rare that Ironclaw told Harry it had been granted exactly twice before in the bank's history. They came bearing books, training equipment, potions from Silverthorn's medical stores, and mountains of paperwork. Harry signed documents until his hand cramped. Formal claim registrations for all 3 lordships. Vault access authorizations. Property transfer acknowledgements. The removal of Albus Dumbledore as magical guardian, notarized, witnessed by 3 goblin elders, and filed simultaneously with the Ministry and the ICW. A formal demand for the unsealing of the Potter will. A cease and desist order sent to Lucius Malfoy, revoking his regency of the Black Seats and demanding a full accounting of every canute spent from Black Vaults during his unauthorized tenure. "Malfoy will not take this quietly," Ironclaw warned as Harry signed the last document. They were in the manor's study, a room Harry had claimed as his own, with tall windows overlooking the lake and shelves that had begun filling themselves with books the house seemed to think he needed. "Good," Harry said. "I don't want him quiet. I want him scared. He is a dangerous man, Harry. Connected. Wealthy. He has the minister's ear. He's been spending my gold and sitting in my chair. Everything he's built in the last 7 years is on a foundation I can pull out from under him. He should be terrified." Ironclaw studied him for a moment, then nodded. "You sound like a goblin. I'll take that as a compliment." It was. Training began on the 3rd day. Ragnarok sent a goblin named Bloodfang, a warrior mage who stood barely 4 feet tall but moved like violence made physical. He arrived at dawn, took one look at Harry standing in the manor's courtyard in his new training clothes, actual clothes that fit, a novelty Harry still hadn't gotten over, and threw a hex at him without warning. Harry didn't dodge it. He couldn't, he didn't even see it coming. The spell hit him in the chest and launched him backward into the fountain. He came up spluttering, soaked, and furious. "What the, Lesson 1, Bloodfang said." His voice was like a saw cutting through metal. "You are powerful. Power means nothing if you are dead before you use it." Again. He threw another hex. Harry flung his hand up instinctively, and the spell hit something, a shimmer in the air between his palm and the curse. Not a proper shield. More like his magic throwing itself in front of him out of sheer self-preservation. The hex deflected sideways and blew a chunk out of the courtyard wall. Bloodfang's eyes narrowed. Instinctive shielding. Raw. Untrained. But strong. He lowered his hand. "You have no wand." "I'm 8. The letter said wizards get wands at 11. Wizards get wands at 11 because the ministry is full of cowards who fear powerful children. Goblins train their warriors from the age of 5, and we do not use wands at all. He held up his hand, and green fire coiled between his fingers. Wands are crutches. They focus magic through an external channel, wood, core, rigid structure. Goblin magic is internal. Channeled through the body itself. It is harder to learn, but infinitely more versatile. And you, Lord Potter, he looked at Harry with something caught between irritation and wonder. You have enough raw power to learn it. Then teach me. I intend to. But first, he held up a finger. You run. 5 miles. Around the lake. Now. I thought this was magic training. Your body is a wreck. Silverthorn's potions are rebuilding your bones and your nutrition, but strength requires work. A powerful wizard in a weak body is a cannon made of glass. Run. Now. If you stop, I hex you again. Harry ran. He made it 3 miles before his legs gave out. Bloodfang hexed him, a stinging jinx that felt like a dozen wasp stings, and Harry got up and ran the last 2 miles on fury alone. He collapsed at the courtyard fountain, chest heaving, legs on fire, and Bloodfang stood over him looking entirely unimpressed. Tomorrow, you run 6 miles. You're insane. I am a goblin warrior mage who has killed 37 dark wizards. I am thorough. There is a difference. Despite the brutal start, Harry grew to respect Bloodfang in a way he hadn't expected. The goblin was merciless but never cruel. There was always a purpose behind the pain, always a lesson embedded in the exhaustion. By the end of the first week, Harry could run 5 miles without stopping. By the end of the second, he could feel his magic responding to physical commands, not spells, exactly, but impulses. He could push objects away from him with a thought. He could summon small items to his hand. He could generate heat in his palms when the morning runs left him shivering. Your magic is adapting to your intent, Bloodfang explained during one of their sessions. They were sitting cross-legged on the courtyard stones, and Harry was trying to maintain a sphere of blue light between his palms. Wand magic uses incantations and movements to shape spells into predetermined forms. What you are doing is pure, and older. You are telling your magic what you want, and it is finding its own way to deliver it. Is that normal? For a wizard? No. For a wizard with your power level and 3 lordship bonds feeding directly into his core. There is no normal. You are unprecedented. Bloodfang's mouth twitched, the closest he came to a smile. Enjoy it. It means I get to figure out your training as we go, which is far more interesting than following a curriculum. The sphere of light pulsed, expanded, and turned from blue to gold. Harry didn't know why. It just felt like it should. The academic tutoring was almost harder than the physical training. Ragnarok sent a goblin scholar named Grimjaw, ancient, withered, and possessed of a memory so vast and precise that Harry suspected the goblin had simply swallowed an encyclopedia at some point and never let it go. Grimjaw covered wizarding history, magical law, politics, the structure of the Wisengamot, the International Statute of Secrecy, goblin culture, the history of the sacred 28 families, and, crucially, the specific histories of the Potter, Black, and Slytherin lines. You must understand, Grimjaw said during one of their early sessions, his voice like dry parchment rustling, that the 3 houses you have claimed are not merely wealthy families. They are political forces. The Potters have been a light-aligned house for 5 centuries, progressive, reformist, champions of Muggle-born rights. Your grandfather Charles Potter fought Grindelwald's forces in the 1940s. Your father defied Voldemort 3 times before his death. And the Blacks? The Blacks are complicated. Traditionally dark-aligned, which does not mean evil, before you absorb that particular ministry propaganda. Dark magic is a school of practice, not a moral designation. The Blacks valued power, tradition, and family above all. They were ruthless but principled, at least in their own way. The house fractured during the last war, some followed Voldemort, some opposed him, and many simply tried to survive. Your godfather, Sirius, was disowned for joining the light. But the blood adoption he performed supersedes the disownment. In the eyes of black family magic, you are the heir. And Slytherin? Grimjaw's old eyes glittered. Slytherin is a legend. Not a political faction, a myth. The Slytherin line was thought to be extinct for centuries before Voldemort revealed his heritage. Salazar Slytherin himself was perhaps the most misunderstood figure in wizarding history. He was brilliant, ruthless, and deeply committed to the protection of magical culture. His conflict with Godric Gryffindor, the famous founding schism of Hogwarts, was not about blood purity, whatever the modern histories claim. What was it about? Security. Slytherin wanted to protect the school from Muggle persecution. This was the 10th century, remember, when witch burnings were real and frequently lethal. He argued for secrecy, for hidden entrances, for wards that would keep the non-magical world out. Gryffindor wanted openness, trust, and integration. They were both right and both wrong, and neither could see it. The schism defined wizarding politics for a millennium. Grimjaw fixed Harry with a stare. You, Lord Potter, carry both legacies. Potter, the light. Slytherin, the dark. Black, the space in between. If you are wise, you will not choose a side. You will be the bridge. It was during the third week that the first confrontation came. Harry was in the study, reviewing the financial audit Ironclaw had completed on the Black Vaults, when the wards rippled. He felt it in his chest, a vibration, like someone striking a bell in a frequency only he could hear. Someone was at the property boundary. Someone with significant magical power. Mippy. The elf appeared instantly. Master Harry. Someone's at the wards. Who is it? Mippy's ears flattened. It is being Headmaster Dumbledore, Master Harry. He is requesting entry. Harry set down the audit report. He looked at it for a moment, the neat columns of figures showing how much gold had been siphoned from his trust vault over 7 years. Then he looked at his rings. Then he looked at Mippy. Don't let him in. Yes, Master Harry. But tell him I'll speak to him. At the gate. Outside the wards. Mippy vanished with a crack. Harry stood, straightened his shirt, dark green, well-fitted, the Potter crest embroidered small on the breast, and walked through the manor to the front doors. Bloodfang materialized at his side as he crossed the courtyard, falling into step without a word. You don't have to come, Harry said. You are my charge. I go where you go. He's supposed to be the greatest wizard alive. I have killed 37 dark wizards. Some of them thought they were the greatest wizard alive. They were wrong. They walked the oak-lined path to the property gate, wrought iron, 15 feet tall, worked with runes that pulsed with soft golden light. Beyond it, standing on the public road with an expression of carefully constructed grandfatherly concern, was Albus Dumbledore. Harry had never seen him before, but he knew him immediately. Tall, thin, ancient, with silver hair and a beard that reached his belt, half-moon spectacles, and robes of deep purple covered in tiny embroidered stars. He looked like a storybook illustration of a wizard. Like someone had designed him to be trusted. His eyes were blue. Very blue. And they were doing something. Harry felt a feather-light touch against his mind, gentle, almost imperceptible. A scanning probe. Legilimency. Grimjaw had warned him about this. Harry slammed his mind shut. It was instinctive, the same way his magic had thrown up a shield against Bloodfang's hex. A wall of cold iron rose behind his eyes, and Dumbledore's probe bounced off it like a pebble off a fortress door. Something flickered in those blue eyes. Surprise. And then, quickly hidden, something else. Calculation. Harry, my boy. The voice was warm, rich, avuncular. Like a favorite uncle greeting a beloved nephew. I am so relieved to see you safe. When my monitoring instruments were damaged, I feared the worst. Director Ragnarok sends his regards, Harry said. He kept his voice level. He stayed behind the gate. You must be Dumbledore. A beat. The slightest recalibration behind those twinkling eyes. You know who I am. I know everything you've done. I've had 3 weeks to learn. Dumbledore's expression softened into something that looked like pain, masterfully performed. Harry, I understand this must all be very confusing. The goblins have their own agenda, and I fear they may have presented certain events in a way that, 47,000 galleons. Dumbledore stopped. That's how much you took from my trust vault, Harry said. Over 7 years. Using a forged guardianship document. Gringotts has verified the forgery, 3 independent goblin authenticators, all in agreement. The parchment was real, the signatures were fabricated. My parents never named you guardian. Their will, which you had sealed without execution, named Sirius Black. Who you let rot in Azkaban for 7 years without a trial. The grandfatherly warmth was still there, but it had frozen around the edges. Like a painting of a fire, all the visual warmth, none of the actual heat. Harry, there are things you don't understand. Sirius Black betrayed your parents. He was their secret keeper, was he? I assure you, then why no trial? If he's so clearly guilty, why wasn't there a trial? Why wasn't evidence presented? Why wasn't he questioned under Veritaserum? Harry tilted his head. Grimjaw, my tutor, tells me that Veritaserum is standard procedure for cases involving suspected Death Eaters. It was used on dozens of them after the war. But not Sirius Black. Not the man accused of betraying the Potters. Why? Dumbledore was silent. Not the silence of a man who doesn't have an answer, the silence of a man who has several answers and is trying to pick the one most likely to work. The situation was chaotic, he said finally. The war had just ended. Emotions were high. Mistakes were made. Mistakes. Harry felt the cold anger stir in his chest. You placed me with muggles who starved me. Who locked me in a cupboard. Who beat me. He saw Dumbledore flinch, a real flinch, not performed. Good. Silverthorn, the goblin healer who examined me, found evidence of repeated untreated fractures, malnutrition severe enough to stunt my growth by 4 inches, and 3 magical binding blocks on my core that suppressed 80% of my power. Blocks that only a handful of wizards alive could have placed. Harry, Lord Potter. The correction hung in the air between them. Dumbledore's eyes dropped to Harry's hands, to the 3 rings glowing on his fingers, and for the first time, the mask cracked. Harry saw the real Dumbledore underneath, just for a moment. Not a kindly grandfather. A chess player who has just realized the board has changed. You claimed the lordships, Dumbledore said softly. 3 of them. Potter, Black, and Slytherin. Slytherin. The word came out flat. Harry, the Slytherin line, that lordship carries a darkness, it carries power. Power that was mine by blood and right of conquest. Power you apparently didn't want me to have, given the binding blocks. I did not place those blocks. Harry looked at him. Really looked at him. 8 years old, and he'd already learned to read people. You learned fast when reading the wrong mood could mean a backhand or a missed meal. Dumbledore's face was earnest, his voice was sincere, and his eyes held the perfect amount of wounded innocence. Harry didn't believe him for a second. You're removed as my guardian, Harry said. That's already done. Gringotts has filed the paperwork. I'm also demanding the unsealing of my parents' will and a formal inquiry into Sirius Black's imprisonment. You'll receive the legal notices within the week. Harry, please. I only ever wanted to protect you. Then you failed. Stay away from my manor, stay away from my vaults, and stay away from me. If you attempt to enter these wards, they will treat you as hostile. If you attempt to interfere with my legal proceedings, Gringotts will make the financial audit public. 47,000 galleons stolen from an orphan's trust fund. Even your reputation won't survive that, headmaster. He turned his back on Albus Dumbledore and walked away. Behind him, on the other side of the gate, the most powerful wizard in Britain stood very still in the afternoon light. The twinkle was gone from his eyes. His hands, hidden in the sleeves of his purple robes, were trembling, not with age, but with something far more dangerous. With the dawning realization that the instrument he had spent 7 years carefully tuning, the weapon he had been forging for the inevitable return of Voldemort, had just slipped its leash. Harry didn't look back. That evening, Harry sat in the Manor's library and let himself shake. Not in front of Bloodfang. Not in front of Ironclaw. Not in front of the elves. But here, alone, surrounded by books that smelled like his father's legacy, he allowed his hands to tremble and his breath to come ragged. He'd stood up to Dumbledore. The Dumbledore. The wizard who had defeated Grindelwald, who led the fight against Voldemort, who was worshipped by virtually the entire magical world. Harry had stood at a gate and called him a thief and a liar to his face, and he hadn't flinched. But that didn't mean he wasn't scared. He was 8. He kept coming back to that. He was 8 years old, and he was playing a game against people who had been playing it for decades. Dumbledore had more experience, more connections, more knowledge, and, binding blocks or not, Harry was still a child with 3 weeks of training and a lot of anger. Anger wasn't enough. He knew that. He'd known it in the cupboard under the stairs, when anger made the lights explode but didn't make the Dursleys stop. Anger was fuel. He needed an engine. Harry pulled a book from the shelf beside him. Grimjaw had recommended it, Political Dynamics of the Wizengamot, a historical analysis. It was dry, dense, and exactly what he needed. He read until midnight. Then he went to bed, slept 4 hours, and ran 6 miles at dawn. The weeks became a rhythm. A brutal, exhilarating, transformative rhythm. Mornings were physical training with Bloodfang, running, exercises adapted for his still healing body, and increasingly complex magical combat drills. Harry's wandless magic progressed at a rate that made Bloodfang stop pretending to be unimpressed. By the end of the first month, Harry could conjure a solid shield that held against goblin battle curses. By the end of the second, he could throw stunners, disarmers, and cutting hexes with enough force to chip stone. His accuracy was terrible. You fight like a cannon pointed by a drunk, Bloodfang observed, but his power was undeniable. The Slytherin ring helped. It carried echoes of its previous lords, not full memories, but instincts. When Harry sparred, he sometimes felt his body move in ways he hadn't planned, dodging at angles that shouldn't have worked, his magic flowing into patterns that felt ancient and alien and perfectly natural. Parseltongue came easily too. He discovered it by accident when a garden snake slithered across the courtyard during training and Harry had told it to move, and it had answered him in a sibilant hiss that somehow resolved into words in his mind. A Parselmouth, Bloodfang had said, watching the snake slither away. The last one was Voldemort. Before him, the trait hadn't manifested in centuries. Is that going to be a problem? For you? No. For the idiots who associate Parseltongue with dark wizardry? Absolutely. Learn to use it. The ability to speak to serpents is neither light nor dark, it is a tool. Tools are defined by their wielder. Afternoons were academic work with Grimjaw, and increasingly, with Ironclaw himself, who took over Harry's political education with the zeal of a goblin who had found his magnum. Harry learned the Wizengamot inside and out, the factions, the alliances, the centuries-old feuds. He learned that his 3 lordships came with 3 seats on the body, and that the Potter and Black seats had been sitting empty, or illegally occupied, in the Black case, for years. The Wizengamot operates on a block system, Ironclaw explained, laying out a chart on the study desk that looked like a spider web drawn by a particularly political spider. The light block, led informally by Dumbledore, holds approximately 40% of the seats. The dark bloc, or traditionalist bloc, as they prefer, is led by Lucius Malfoy and holds about 35%. The remaining 25% are neutrals and independents. Legislation requires a simple majority, which means whoever courts the neutrals wins. And my seats? The Potter seat is light-aligned by tradition. The Black seat is dark-aligned by tradition. The Slytherin seat is, Ironclaw paused, his quill hovering. The Slytherin seat has not been occupied in so long that it has no alignment. It is a wild card. Together, your 3 seats give you significant weight, but more importantly, the fact that you hold seats in both the light and dark blocks makes you a bridge figure. You could be a kingmaker, Harry. If you play it right. I don't want to play it right. I want to burn the game down and build a better one. Ironclaw's quill touched the parchment and stayed there. He looked up at Harry with an expression the boy had learned to read as goblin respect. That, the account manager said quietly, is a much harder thing to do. But considerably more interesting. Harry also spent time with the portraits. Potter Manor's gallery held 18 generations of Potters, all of them painted with enough magical skill to maintain full conversational ability. Harry's grandfather, Charles Potter, a broad-shouldered man with a fierce grin and Harry's jawline, became a particular favorite. "You've got the look, lad," Charles said during one of their evening conversations, his painted eyes bright with a pride that made Harry's chest ache. "The Potter look. Your dad had it too, that set to the jaw when he decided something. Stubborn as a Welsh green dragon, the pair of you. Did you know Dumbledore? Knew him well enough. Fought alongside him against Grindelwald's lot in 45. Charles's painted face grew serious. He was brilliant. And brave. And absolutely bloody certain that he was the only person qualified to make decisions for everyone else. That was his flaw, lad. Not malice, certainty. He'd sacrifice anyone on the altar of his greater good, and he'd weep real tears while doing it. That's what makes him dangerous. A man who enjoys cruelty is limited by his appetite. A man who believes cruelty is necessary has no limits at all. Harry thought about that often. The Malfoy response came 6 weeks in. Not directly, Lucius Malfoy was far too political for a frontal assault. Instead, a series of articles appeared in the Daily Prophet, the Wizarding World's primary newspaper. Ironclaw brought them to Harry's attention over breakfast, laying the clippings on the table with the delicacy of a man handling something venomous. Boy Who lived missing from Muggle home, ministry concerned Gringotts bank under scrutiny, are goblins holding the Potter heir? Dumbledore calls for calm and caution regarding Potter situation. Harry read them all, eating toast. The articles were masterfully constructed, never quite lying, but shaping the truth into a weapon. The narrative they built was exactly what Ragnarok had predicted, a confused child, manipulated by goblins, making decisions he couldn't possibly understand. Dumbledore featured prominently as the concerned, benevolent guardian figure, expressing gentle worry about his ward's well-being. Malfoy is behind the Prophet articles, Ironclaw said. He owns a controlling interest in the newspaper through a shell company. The Dumbledore quotes are genuine. The old man is cooperating with Malfoy on this, which tells you how threatened they both feel. They're both scared of an 8-year-old. They're scared of what that 8-year-old represents. 3 lordships. 3 Wizengamot seats. Enough gold to fund a political revolution. And a name, The Boy Who Lived, that carries more public goodwill than Dumbledore and Malfoy combined. Ironclaw tapped the newspaper. They are trying to control the narrative before you can establish your own. If they succeed, you'll walk into the Wizengamot already diminished. Then I need to control the narrative first. How? Harry looked at the articles again. Thought about what Grimjaw had taught him about public opinion. Thought about what Charles had told him about Dumbledore, not malice, but certainty. Thought about what he knew of Lucius Malfoy, a man who built his power on stolen foundations. I need allies, Harry said. Real ones. Not goblins, no offense, none taken. Continue. Wizards. People with credibility. People the public trusts. People who have reason to distrust Dumbledore or Malfoy or both. A short list. Then I need to make it longer. Harry set down his toast. Ironclaw. You said the Black family tree, Sirius was disowned, but there were others who were cast out. Who else? Ironclaw produced a scroll from somewhere inside his coat. Harry had learned that goblin coats contained approximately the same amount of storage space as a small warehouse, and unrolled it across the table. The Black family tree was enormous, stretching back centuries, with names burned out in places where family members had been disowned. Andromeda Tonks, Ironclaw said, pointing to a burned circle near the bottom. Born Andromeda Black. Eldest daughter of Cygnus Black. Disowned for marrying Ted Tonks, a Muggle-born wizard. She has a daughter, Nymphadora, age 15, currently attending Hogwarts. Andromeda is a trained healer and a respected member of the magical community, though the Black disownment cost her socially. She married for love and got burned off the family tree for it. Essentially. Can I undo that? As Lord Black? You can. The Lord of the House has absolute authority over the family roles. You could reinstate Andromeda and her family with a word. Then I want to meet her. Can we arrange it? I'll send an owl today. An iron claw, make it a personal letter. From me. Not a legal summons. She spent years being punished by the Black family. I don't want her thinking the new Lord Black is more of the same. 3 days later, Andromeda Tonks stood in the parlor of Potter Manor, looking at Harry with an expression he couldn't quite decode. She was tall, with dark hair and the sharp, aristocratic features of the Black family, but her eyes were warm, brown, not the cold gray of the Blacks in the portraits, and she held herself with the careful poise of a woman who had learned to navigate hostile terrain. Her husband Ted stood beside her, a stocky, sandy-haired man with a kind face and an easy smile that didn't quite hide his nervousness. And behind them both, trying to look bored and failing spectacularly, was a teenage girl with hair that was currently a vivid shade of turquoise. Lord Potter-Black, Andromeda said. Her voice was controlled, formal. Thank you for your invitation. Please sit down. And it's just Harry. You're 8 years old. I get that a lot. Something cracked in Andromeda's composure, not much, just a flicker at the corner of her mouth. She sat. Ted sat beside her. The turquoise-haired girl dropped into an armchair with the graceless enthusiasm of a teenager and immediately knocked over a side table. Nymphadora. Andromeda said sharply. Don't call me that, the girl said, righting the table with a flick of her wand. It's Tonks. Just Tonks. Sorry about the table. I break things. It's sort of my signature move. Harry decided immediately that he liked her. Mrs. Tonks, he said, turning back to Andromeda. I asked you here because I want to do something, and I want to do it properly. Not as a legal formality, as a conversation between family. Andromeda's expression tightened. Family. The Blacks haven't considered me family in 17 years. The old Lord Black didn't. I'm not the old Lord Black. Harry held up his left hand, showing the black ring. I've read the family history. I know why you were disowned. You married the person you loved, and your family punished you for it. That was wrong. And I want to fix it. The room was very quiet. I, Harry James Potter, Lord of the ancient and most noble House of Black, hereby reinstate Andromeda Black Tonks and all her descendants to the House of Black, with full rights, privileges, and protections thereof. The disownment is nullified. The burn is healed. Welcome home. The black ring pulsed. A wave of silver light washed through the room, cool, clean, carrying the scent of winter wind, and Harry felt something shift in the family magic. A door opening. A wound closing. Andromeda Tonks, who had spent 17 years as a woman without a family name, who had watched her sisters choose dark lords and blood purity over love, who had built a life from nothing with a muggle-born husband and a daughter she adored, Andromeda Tonks pressed her hand to her mouth and closed her eyes, and tears spilled down her sharp, proud face. Ted put his arm around her. Tonks was staring at Harry with her mouth open, her hair cycling through colors, turquoise to pink to silver to gold, like her emotions were too big for just one shade. "You didn't have to do that," Andromeda whispered. "Yeah, I did. You don't even know us. I know you were thrown out for loving someone. I know what it's like to grow up being told you're not good enough, that you don't belong. I'm not going to run a family that does that to people." Andromeda opened her eyes. The tears were still there, but underneath them was something sharper now, something assessing. She was a black, after all. Emotion and calculation could coexist. "You're not what I expected," she said. "What did you expect?" "A puppet. Gringotts pulling the strings, a confused child reciting speeches someone else wrote." She studied his face. "You wrote that letter yourself, didn't you? The one inviting us?" "Every word." "And the speech just now?" "The reinstatement?" "I looked up the formal wording, but the rest was mine." Andromeda looked at Ted. Some wordless communication passed between them, the kind that happens between people who have loved each other for a long time and can hold entire conversations in a glance. "What do you need from us, Harry?" Ted asked. His voice was gentle but direct. Harry appreciated direct. "Honestly, I need family. Real family. People who'll tell me when I'm being stupid and stand next to me when I'm not." He paused. "I also need adults the wizarding world respects. Dumbledore and Malfoy are trying to paint me as a goblin puppet. Having a black family healer and her family publicly supporting me makes that story harder to sell." "So it's political," Andromeda said. "Not accusatory, just clarifying." "It's both. I won't pretend it's not useful. But it's not only useful. I want," he stopped. Took a breath. "I grew up in a cupboard. I didn't know I had a family. I didn't know any of this existed. You're the first magical family member I've met who wasn't a portrait on a wall. So yes, I need allies. But I'd also really like to have an aunt." The word hit Andromeda like a physical force. Harry saw it land, saw her flinch, then soften, then straighten. "You're a dangerous young man, Harry Potter," she said. "You know exactly what to say. Is that a yes?" "It's a, come to dinner on Sunday and we'll see." She stood, smoothing her robes. "Ted makes an excellent roast. Nymphadora will probably set something on fire." "Guaranteed," Tonks said cheerfully. Harry went to Sunday dinner. And the Sunday after that. And the one after that. The Tonks household was everything the Dursleys were not. It was warm, loud, cluttered, and full of laughter. Ted cooked enormous meals and insisted Harry eat thirds. Andromeda alternated between fierce maternal protectiveness and razor-sharp political advice that rivaled Ironclaws. And Tonks, 15, clumsy, brilliant, and utterly incapable of taking anything seriously for more than 30 seconds, became the older sister Harry had never had. "So let me get this straight," Tonks said one evening, sprawled upside down on the living room sofa with her feet on the wall and her hair a violent shade of orange. "You're Lord of 3 houses, you're richer than the Malfoys, you can do wandless magic, and you're 8. That about covers it. And you're going to walk into the Wizengamot and basically declare war on Dumbledore and Malfoy simultaneously. Not war. Just, a very firm correction." Tonks grinned. It was a spectacular grin, wide and wild and slightly unhinged. "I want front row seats. Your family. You get a box." By the end of the 3rd month, Harry was ready. Not fully trained, Bloodfong made it clear that fully trained was years away, but ready enough. His wandless magic was combat functional. His knowledge of wizarding law and politics was comprehensive. His body, thanks to Silverthorn's potions and Bloodfang's brutal regimen, had begun to fill out. He'd gained nearly a stone and grown 2 inches, and the haunted, hollow look was fading from his face. But more importantly, his preparations were complete. The investigation into Sirius Black had yielded results. Gringotts' legal team, human solicitors retained for exactly this kind of work, had filed a formal demand with the Department of Magical Law Enforcement for Black's trial records. The DMLE had responded that no records existed. No trial had ever taken place. The demand was now a matter of public record, which meant the ministry couldn't bury it. The financial audit of the Black Vaults was complete. Lucius Malfoy had siphoned approximately 1.2 million galleons over 7 years, some directly, some through shell accounts, some through charitable donations to organizations he controlled. Every transaction was documented. Every receipt filed. The case was airtight. The Potter will unsealing motion had been filed and was scheduled for hearing at the next Wisengamot session. Dumbledore had attempted to have it delayed, twice, and been overruled both times. The legal momentum was building. And Harry had sent letters. Dozens of them. To every neutral and independent member of the Wisengamot. Not political letters, personal ones. Introducing himself. Acknowledging his parents' legacy. Expressing his intent to take his seats. Asking, humbly but directly, for nothing more than an open mind. The letters were masterful, Ironclaw said, reviewing the responses that had begun flooding in. 37 replies. 29 positive. 6 cautiously neutral. 2 hostile, both Malfoy allies. And the press? Andromeda's interview with the Quibbler generated significant attention. The Prophet tried to ignore it, but the Quibbler's circulation tripled. The story of the boy who lived reclaiming his heritage is too compelling to suppress. Andromeda had given the interview at Harry's request, a carefully constructed account of the reinstatement, the family connection, and Harry's character. She'd described him as intelligent, principled, and remarkably self-possessed for his age. She'd also, almost casually, mentioned that Harry had been raised by muggles who mistreated him and that his magical guardian had been removed for cause. The magical world had reacted like a kicked hornet's nest. Who failed the boy WHO lived? The Quibbler's headline screamed. And for the first time, the Daily Prophet couldn't control the story. Tomorrow, Harry said. He was standing at the window of his study, looking out over the lake. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of copper and gold. His 3 rings caught the light. Tomorrow I go to the ministry. Ironclaw stood beside him. Bloodfang stood behind him. Andromeda and Ted were in the parlor, going over last-minute political strategy. Tonks was in the kitchen, probably breaking something. Are you ready? Ironclaw asked. Harry thought about the cupboard under the stairs. About burnt bacon and broken light bulbs. About a letter from a dead father that said don't let anyone tell you what you're supposed to be. He thought about Dumbledore's blue eyes and Malfoy's stolen gold and a godfather screaming in a prison no one could see. He thought about the 3 houses whose magic lived in his blood, the courage of the Potters, the ferocity of the Blacks, the cunning of Slytherin, all of it his, all of it waiting. Send the notification to the Wisengamot, Harry said. Lord Potter-Black-Slytherin will be taking his seats at tomorrow's session. Ironclaw nodded. He allowed himself the smallest of smiles. It will be done. Harry turned from the window. The sunset burned at his back, silhouetting him in copper light, and his shadow stretched long across the study floor. 3 rings glowed on the fingers of a boy who had been a cupboard prisoner 3 months ago and would walk into the seat of magical government tomorrow. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't scared. He was ready. And somewhere deep beneath London, in the Ministry of Magic's grandest chamber, 3 seats that had sat empty for years began to hum with a faint, expectant light, as if they, too, had been waiting. Chapter 3, the serpent's throne. Harry had imagined the Ministry of Magic would feel grand. It didn't. It felt like a hospital designed by someone who'd read about hospitals but never been sick, all surface impressiveness with something antiseptic underneath. The atrium was cavernous, floored in dark polished wood, with a ceiling charmed to show whatever weather the ministry thought would make people feel productive. Today it showed clear blue sky and soft clouds. Harry thought it was trying too hard. He'd arrived through the Gringotts liaison entrance, a private flue connection that bypassed the public atrium entirely and deposited him in a secure antechamber 3 floors below the Wizengamot chamber. Ironclaw had insisted on it. The public entrance would turn your arrival into a spectacle before you're ready to make it one, he'd said. Control the timing. Harry straightened his robes. Not a child's robes, formal lordship attire, tailored by goblin craftsmen from fabric that cost more per inch than the Dursley's car. Black base, trimmed in the 3 colors of his houses, deep Potter red at the collar, black silver along the cuffs, and Slytherin green threading through the embroidery. His 3 house crests were worked into the left breast: stag, greyhounds, serpent, small enough to be tasteful, large enough to be unmistakable. He looked like what he was. And what he was a lord coming to claim what belonged to him. Bloodfang stood at his right shoulder in full goblin battle dress, dark leather and silver steel, a short sword at his hip, his scarred face set in an expression that promised violence to anyone who earned it. Ironclaw stood at his left in formal banking attire, carrying a leather case that contained enough documented evidence to end several political careers. Andromeda Tonks walked behind them in robes of midnight blue, her black family features a deliberate visual statement. Ted had wanted to come but had agreed to stay home. Too many cooks, he'd said, kissing Andromeda's cheek. Go terrify them, love. They took the lift up. It was a rattling, clanking thing that moved sideways as often as it moved vertically, and Harry felt Bloodfang's hand tighten on his sword hilt with every unexpected lurch. Goblins don't like lifts, Harry observed. Goblins don't like being inside boxes controlled by wizard engineering. Fair. The lift deposited them on level 10, the Wizengamot level. The corridor was wider here, more ornate, the walls hung with portraits of historical chief warlocks who watched Harry's procession with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright alarm. Word had spread. Harry could see it in the increased foot traffic, the clusters of ministry workers who just happened to be loitering near the Wizengamot entrance, the flash of a camera that Ironclaw neutralized with a casual wave of his hand that turned the device into a small and confused toad. The doors to the Wizengamot chamber were 30 feet tall and made of something that wasn't quite wood and wasn't quite stone. Ancient. Carved with the seals of every house that held a seat, hundreds of them, layered over centuries. Harry found his 3 without looking, as if his rings were pulling his attention. Potter near the top, old and deep carved. Black in the middle row, sharp and angular. And Slytherin, at the very top, almost hidden by age, but still there. Still waiting. The doors opened. The chamber was built like a coliseum, tiered benches sweeping upward in a vast semicircle around a central floor. The benches were already filling. Witches and wizards in formal robes, some ancient, some middle-aged, a few younger, all of them turning to see who had just entered. The noise of conversation, the low, measured hum of political operators trading information, faltered. Stuttered. Died. Harry walked in. Not quickly. Not slowly. At the pace of someone who had every right to be there and knew it. Bloodfang and Ironclaw flanked him. Andromeda walked 3 steps behind, her chin high, the black family features on full display. Every eye in the chamber tracked them. Harry could feel the weight of those stares. Some curious. Some hostile. Some, and these were the ones he filed away for later, calculating. The neutrals. The ones trying to figure out which way the wind was about to blow. The central floor was reserved for speakers and petitioners. Above it, on the highest tier, sat 2 figures Harry recognized from Grimjaw's descriptions. Albus Dumbledore occupied the chief warlock's chair, an ornate throne of carved oak at the apex of the chamber. He was wearing robes of deep crimson, his silver beard arranged with care, his half-moon spectacles catching the magelight. His expression was serene. His eyes were not. Below and to the right, in a cluster of seats draped in dark green and silver, sat Lucius Malfoy. Harry had never seen the man in person, but he was exactly what the dossier had promised, tall, pale, handsome in a cold and polished way, with white blonde hair pulled back and a cane of black wood topped with a silver serpent's head resting across his knees. He looked like a man who had been carved from expensive marble and taught to sneer. Malfoy's eyes locked onto Harry the moment he entered. Something moved behind that porcelain mask, calculation, surprise, and a quick hot flash of something that might have been fear, swallowed and buried before it could reach his expression. Harry met his gaze and held it. Then he smiled, just slightly, just enough, and turned away. He felt Malfoy's fury like heat from a furnace at his back. "Good. Lord Potter-Black-Slytherin," a voice boomed. The court clerk, a thin, nervous wizard standing at a podium near the central floor, was reading from a scroll, his voice magically amplified. Presenting himself to claim the hereditary seats of the ancient and noble house of Potter, the ancient and most noble house of Black, and the ancient and noble house of Slytherin. Does the claimant bear the rings of office? Harry raised both hands. 3 rings blazed, ruby, diamond, emerald, each flaring with light that was visible even in the well-lit chamber. The ruby threw red highlights across the nearest benches. The diamond scattered rainbows. The emerald pulsed with a deep, living green that seemed to darken the air around it. A murmur swept the chamber. Several of the older members rose from their seats for a better look. Harry heard the word Slytherin repeated in a dozen different tones: shock, disbelief, fear, excitement. "The rings are verified," the clerk said, and his voice cracked slightly on the last word. "Lord Potter-Black-Slytherin, your seats are confirmed. Please take your place." 3 seats. Harry had studied the chamber's layout. The Potter seat was in the light block, upper tier, near Dumbledore's allies. The Black seat was in the dark block, lower tier, surrounded by families Harry now knew were connected to former Death Eaters. The Slytherin seat was in neither, it sat alone, at the very center of the highest tier, directly across from the Chief Warlock's chair. An ancient seat, carved from dark stone, that hadn't been occupied in living memory. Harry walked to the Slytherin seat first. The choice was deliberate. Not the light seat, which would signal alignment with Dumbledore. Not the dark seat, which would signal alignment with Malfoy. The center. The seat that watched everything and belonged to no one's faction. He climbed the tiers. The chamber was silent except for his footsteps and the rustle of his robes. As he passed the light block, he felt Dumbledore's gaze on him, heavy, probing, that same feather-light legitimacy touch brushing against his mental shields and finding nothing but iron. He reached the Slytherin seat. It was cold, ancient stone, unwarmed by use for centuries. Harry put his hand on the armrest, and the emerald ring pulsed. The stone warmed. Not gradually, instantly, as if a fire had been lit inside it. The seat recognized its lord. And then something else happened, something Harry hadn't expected, something that made every single person in the chamber stop breathing. The wards of the Wizengamot chamber activated. Not the everyday wards, the security charms, the privacy enchantments, the standard magical architecture. The ancient wards. The ones laid down when the chamber was built, over 1,000 years ago, by the same 4 founders who had built Hogwarts. Green light erupted from the Slytherin seat and raced along channels carved into the stone tiers, channels that had been invisible until this moment, filled with dust and age, now blazing with emerald fire. They connected to 3 other seats, the Gryffindor seat, the Hufflepuff seat, the Ravenclaw seat, each of which flared with their own colors. Red, yellow, blue, green. The 4 founder lights met at the center of the chamber floor and merged into a pillar of white radiance that touched the ceiling and vanished. Then silence. The lights faded. The channels went dark. The chamber looked exactly as it had before, except that every ward in the building had just been refreshed to full strength for the first time in centuries, and every person present had felt it in their bones. Harry sat down. "Well," said a voice from the light block, an elderly witch with a monocle and a severe jaw whom Harry recognized from Grimjaw's descriptions as Amelia Bones, head of the DMLE. That was dramatic. Scattered, nervous laughter. It broke the tension just enough for people to remember how to breathe. Dumbledore's voice carried over the chamber, calm and measured. "The chair recognizes Lord Potter-Black-Slytherin and confirms his assumption of 3 hereditary seats. The record will reflect that the founder wards have acknowledged the Slytherin lordship." A pause. "Welcome to the Wizengamot, Lord Potter." "Thank you, Chief Warlock," Harry said. His voice carried, not magically amplified, just clear and steady in the perfect acoustics of the chamber. "I appreciate the welcome. I have business to bring before this body, if the chair permits." Another pause. Dumbledore couldn't refuse, any seated lord had the right to present business. But Harry could see the old wizard calculating, trying to predict what was coming, and unable to. "The floor recognizes Lord Potter-Black-Slytherin." Harry stood. He didn't move to the central floor, he spoke from the Slytherin seat, looking down at the entire chamber from the highest point in the room. Another deliberate choice. The central floor was for petitioners. He wasn't petitioning. He was commanding. "I'll be brief," Harry said. "I have 3 items of business. The first concerns the ancient and most noble House of Black." He looked at Lucius Malfoy. Malfoy met his gaze with the perfect composure of a man who had been expecting this and had prepared accordingly. His pale grey eyes were steady, his posture relaxed, one elegant hand resting on his serpent-headed cane. The picture of unconcerned aristocratic confidence. Harry was about to ruin it. "For the past 7 years," Harry said, "the Black family seats on this body and the Black family vaults at Gringotts have been managed by a regent, Lord Lucius Malfoy, who claimed authority through his marriage to Narcissa Malfoy, née Black. I have reviewed the terms of this regency. I have also reviewed the financial records." He nodded to Ironclaw, who opened the leather case and produced a stack of documents bound in dark green ribbon. "Lord Malfoy's regency was never legally valid. The Black lordship passed to Sirius Orion Black upon the death of Arcturus Black in 1991. Sirius Black, though imprisoned, was never convicted, a point I'll return to shortly, and therefore never lost his titles. In any case, the blood adoption performed between Sirius Black and myself in 1981 designated me as heir apparent. Lord Malfoy's claim derived from a secondary marriage connection that is superseded by both direct blood adoption and primary line descent." Harry let that settle. Malfoy's composure held, but Harry could see the tendons in his hand tightening on the cane. "In practical terms," Harry continued, "Lord Malfoy has spent 7 years exercising authority he did not legally possess. During that time, he withdrew approximately 1.2 million galleons from the Black family vaults. I have the transaction records here," he gestured to the documents Ironclaw held. "Authenticated by Gringotts, time-stamped, and cross-referenced with Lord Malfoy's personal accounts." Now the murmur rose. 1.2 million galleons was a staggering sum, enough to buy influence, fund campaigns, bribe officials, and build the kind of political machine Malfoy had been operating for years. The neutral bloc members were leaning forward. The dark bloc members were very carefully not looking at Malfoy. "I'm not here to file criminal charges," Harry said. "Not today. What I am here to do is formally revoke Lord Malfoy's regency, effective immediately, and demand full restitution of all funds withdrawn from Black vaults during his unauthorized tenure." He looked at Malfoy. The man's composure had cracked, just slightly, just around the eyes, and what showed through wasn't fear. It was rage. Cold, controlled, aristocratic rage. The kind that doesn't explode. The kind that plans. "You are a child," Malfoy said. His voice was silk over steel. playing at lordship with goblin handlers pulling your strings. This body should not, point of order, Amelia Bones cut in. Her monocle flashed as she turned to face Malfoy. Lord Potter-Black-Slytherin bears verified lordship rings and has been confirmed by the court clerk. His age is legally irrelevant. I might also point out, Lord Malfoy, that addressing a fellow lord as a child is a violation of Wizengamot decorum. The penalty is a 50 galleon fine. Shall I assess it? Malfoy's jaw tightened. No. Then I suggest you respond to Lord Potter's claims with substance rather than insults. Malfoy rose. He was tall, much taller than Harry, obviously, and he used his height deliberately, drawing himself up to full imposing stature. The regency was granted by the previous Lord Black, Arcturus Black himself, in the event that no direct heir claimed the lordship. I have the documentation, forged, Harry said. The word dropped like a stone into a pond. Malfoy stopped mid-sentence. Gringotts has examined the document you presented to claim regency, Harry said. The same authenticators who examined the forged guardianship document Albus Dumbledore used to access my trust vault have examined yours. The parchment is genuine. The signature of Arcturus Black is fabricated. The magical seal was replicated, skillfully, but not perfectly. There are cascade errors in the runic substructure that indicate the seal was copied from an existing document rather than generated by Lord Black's magic. Harry paused. You're welcome to commission your own independent analysis. I'm confident in the results. Malfoy's face was white. Not scared white, fury white. The kind of white that happens when all the blood drains to fuel the brain's emergency planning centers. This is slander, he said, his voice perfectly level. I will not stand here and be accused, then sit down, Harry said. Because I'm moving on to my second item of business. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't meant to be funny. But someone in the neutral block laughed, a single, sharp bark of surprised amusement, and it spread. Nervous, incredulous laughter rippled through the chamber. An 8-year-old had just told Lucius Malfoy to sit down, and the sheer audacity of it cracked something loose in the room's atmosphere. Malfoy sat. He had no choice. To remain standing after being told to sit would look like he was fighting with a child, and fighting with a child was a battle you couldn't win, either you lost to a child, or you beat a child. Neither was a good look. Harry filed away the tactical lesson. Then he turned to face the Chief Warlock's chair. My second item of business concerns the sealed will of James and Lily Potter. Dumbledore's serenity didn't waver. But his hands, resting on the arms of the Chief Warlock's chair, pressed down just slightly, the only tell Harry could see. A motion was filed 8 weeks ago to unseal my parents' will, Harry said. The will has been sealed since November 1981, on the order of the then Chief Warlock, you, Headmaster Dumbledore. In 25 years of Wizengamot precedent, there are only 3 recorded instances of a will being sealed, and all 3 were unsealed within 6 months after the immediate security concerns were resolved. My parents' will has been sealed for 7 years. The motion to unseal has been delayed twice by procedural objections originating from the Chief Warlock's office. He paused to let the members absorb that. I am the sole surviving heir of James and Lily Potter. I am requesting, formally, publicly, and on the record, that this body vote to unseal the will immediately. No more delays. No more procedural objections. My parents had the right to determine who would raise their son. That right was denied them. I'm asking this body to correct that. The chamber was very still. I would also note, Harry said, and his voice was softer now, not weaker, but deliberately, carefully controlled, that the Potter will is believed to name Sirius Black as my primary guardian. Sirius Black has been in Azkaban for 7 years without trial. Without charges. Without any of the legal protections this body supposedly guarantees to every witch and wizard. If the will confirms his guardianship role, it raises immediate questions about why he was imprisoned without due process, and who benefited from keeping him silent. He didn't look at Dumbledore. He didn't have to. Every person in the chamber was already looking at the chief warlock, and the temperature of those looks was dropping fast. Dumbledore spoke. Lord Potter's motion to unseal the Potter will is noted. I believe standard procedure calls for a vote. I second the motion, Amelia Bones said immediately. As do I, said a heavy-set wizard in the neutral block whom Harry recognized as Lord Ogden. The motion has been made and seconded. All in favor? Hands rose. Harry counted, not because he needed to, but because he wanted to see exactly who voted which way, and he wanted them to see him watching. The light block voted almost unanimously in favor. They couldn't oppose unsealing the will of murdered heroes without looking monstrous, regardless of what Dumbledore wanted. The neutral block voted in favor. The dark block split, some voting yes, some abstaining, a handful voting no. The motion carries, Dumbledore said. The Potter will shall be unsealed and read into the record at the next session. I request it be read today, Harry said. The will is in Gringotts' possession. Ironclaw has a certified copy with him now. A ripple of reaction, surprise, mostly, and a growing appreciation among the politically savvy members for the level of preparation on display. An 8-year-old with a goblin legal team that had anticipated every procedural hurdle and arrived with documents ready. Dumbledore's pause lasted a heartbeat too long. If the body has no objection, no one objected. Dumbledore nodded, and Ironclaw descended to the central floor, opened his leather case, and produced a scroll sealed with the Potter crest. The last will and testament of James Charles Potter and Lily Jane Potter, née Evans, Ironclaw read. His voice was clear and carried perfectly. Dated September 15, 1981. The chamber listened. We, James and Lily Potter, being of sound mind and magic, do hereby declare the following to be our final wishes. Guardianship of our son, Harry James Potter, is to be granted to Sirius Orion Black, his godfather by blood adoption right. In the event that Sirius is unable to serve, guardianship passes to Frank and Alice Longbottom. In the event that neither party is available, guardianship passes to Andromeda Tonks, née Black, sister in spirit to Lily and beloved family. Andromeda, standing against the wall of the chamber, pressed her hand to her chest. Harry caught her eye and nodded. Under no circumstances, Ironclaw continued, and his voice sharpened on the words, is our son to be placed with Petunia and Vernon Dursley. Lily's sister has made her hatred of magic and magical people clear, and we do not trust her to provide a safe or loving home for Harry. Dead silence. Under no circumstances is Albus Dumbledore to be granted guardianship, magical or otherwise, over our son or our estate. While we respect the headmaster's role in the war effort, recent events have given us cause to question his judgment regarding our family. The details are contained in a sealed memory left in the Potter family vault, for Harry's eyes only. The silence was so complete that Harry could hear his own heartbeat. All assets of the Potter estate pass to Harry James Potter in their entirety. The trust vault at Gringotts is to be managed by the goblins, not by any external guardian. Any withdrawals not authorized by Harry himself or by Gringotts on his behalf are to be considered theft and prosecuted accordingly. Ironclaw lowered the scroll. The will continues with specific bequests to friends and allies. I can read those into the record if desired, but the guardianship clauses are as stated. Harry looked at Dumbledore. The old wizard sat in his ornate chair, and for the first time, the serene mask had slipped, not dramatically, not completely, but enough. His blue eyes were fixed on some middle distance, and behind the half-moon spectacles, something was working. Processing. Recalculating. Under no circumstances, Harry repeated quietly into the silence. My parents knew, headmaster. They knew what you would do. And you did it anyway. Dumbledore's gaze refocused. It landed on Harry, and the boy saw something in those ancient blue eyes he hadn't expected. Not anger. Not calculation. Sorrow. Deep, genuine, aching sorrow, the sorrow of a man who believed, truly believed, that everything he'd done was necessary, and was now watching the evidence of that belief's cost laid bare in front of the people whose respect sustained his power. Harry, Lord Potter. Dumbledore inclined his head. The smallest of surrenders. Lord Potter. I acknowledge the contents of the will. I acknowledge that my actions as your magical guardian were, not in accordance with your parents' wishes. I believed, and I still believe, that the protections placed on the Dursley home were necessary for your safety. The blood wards derived from your mother's sacrifice were unnecessary, Harry said. Because the man who killed my parents is dead. Has been dead for 7 years. And even if he weren't, even if there were some lingering threat, my parents explicitly said no. There will said no. And you overrode the wishes of dead people who couldn't fight back, because you decided you knew better. The chamber was hanging on every word. Harry could feel it, the shift in the room's gravity, the weight of opinion tilting. I'm not asking for an apology, Harry said. An apology wouldn't mean anything. What I'm asking for is accountability. The 47,000 galleons taken from my trust vault, I want them returned. The binding blocks that were placed on my magical core, I want a formal investigation into who placed them. And Sirius Black, I want a trial. A real one. With Veritaserum, with evidence, with every protection the law guarantees. If he's guilty, let the evidence prove it. If he's innocent, Harry, let the sentence hang. This body can authorize a trial, Amelia Bones said. She was on her feet, and Harry could see the DMLE head's mind working behind that monocle, not political calculation but something cleaner. Legal outrage. Professional fury at the discovery that her department had failed, fundamentally and catastrophically, to do its job. I move for the immediate scheduling of a full criminal trial for Sirius Orion Black, with Veritaserum authorized, to be conducted within 30 days. Seconded, said 3 voices simultaneously. Dumbledore didn't fight it. He couldn't, the will had blown the doors off, and fighting a trial for a man the Potters had trusted with their son would be political suicide. The motion carries by acclamation. A trial will be scheduled. His voice was steady, but it had lost its warmth. It was the voice of a man playing for time. My third item of business, Harry said. The chamber braced. He could feel it, a collective intake of breath, a tightening of posture across all 3 blocks. What else could the boy possibly have? As Lord Slytherin, Harry said, I hold a founding claim on Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. 1/4 ownership, with attendant authority over the school's wards, grounds, and governance structure. This claim was confirmed by Gringotts and, as this body just witnessed, by the founder wards themselves. Now the murmur was louder. Alarmed. The implications were vast, and every politically literate person in the room was realizing it at the same time. I'm not here to disrupt the school, Harry said. Hogwarts is an institution that has served the magical world for 1,000 years, and I respect that. But as a founding lord, I have the right to review the school's operations, its curriculum, and its governance. I intend to exercise that right. He looked at Dumbledore. Headmaster, I'll be requesting a meeting with you, and with the Board of Governors, to discuss several concerns. The current curriculum excludes several branches of magic that were taught by the founders themselves. The school's wards haven't been properly maintained in decades, I felt their state when the founder magic activated. And there are artifacts within the school that belong to the Slytherin estate and have been neglected. He was thinking of the Chamber of Secrets. Grimjaw had told him the legend, and as Lord Slytherin, with Parseltongue and the ancestral ring, Harry knew it was more than legend. There was a chamber beneath the school, built by Slytherin himself, and whatever was inside it was part of Harry's inheritance. These are matters for private discussion, Dumbledore said. His voice had recovered some of its warmth, but it was the warmth of a diplomat, not a grandfather. He'd adjusted. Recalibrated. Already planning his next move. I welcome the opportunity to work with Lord Slytherin on matters pertaining to Hogwarts. I appreciate that, Harry said. I'll have Ironclaw arrange it. He sat down. The chamber exhaled. What followed was 2 hours of procedural aftermath that Harry endured with the patience Grimjaw had drilled into him. Formal votes confirming the revocation of Malfoy's regency. Formal votes authorizing the Black Vault audit findings to be entered into the Wizengamot record. A scheduling motion for the Sirius Black trial. And question after question from members who wanted to know more, understand more, and, in several cases, position themselves closer to the boy who had just detonated the chamber's political landscape. Harry answered every question directly, briefly, and without flinching. When a Malfoy ally named Not tried to challenge the Slytherin lordship on the grounds that it derived partially from conquest of a wizard who was merely defeated, not killed, Harry responded that the magic itself had confirmed his claim, and if Lord Not wished to dispute the judgment of a 1,000-year-old ward scheme laid down by the founders themselves, he was welcome to take it up with the wards directly. Not did not pursue the point. When a light block member asked whether Harry intended to promote dark magic through his Slytherin seat, Harry said, I intend to promote good magic. I'll leave it to the practitioners to argue about the color. When a neutral member asked, tentatively, almost apologetically, whether Harry was being controlled by the goblins, Harry said, the goblins are my allies and my bankers. They're very good at both. If being well advised by competent professionals makes me a puppet, then I suggest this body examine how many of its members are advised by competent professionals, and consider the alternative. That one got a genuine laugh. Even some of the dark block smiled. Harry left the chamber flanked by Ironclaw and Bloodfang, with Andromeda walking beside him now, no longer behind, a shift that several observers noted and correctly interpreted. They moved through the corridor toward the secure flue exit, and Harry allowed himself 3 seconds of private triumph before locking it away. The hard part was just beginning. Lord Potter. The voice caught him 10 paces from the flue. Harry turned. Lucius Malfoy stood in the corridor. Alone, his allies had peeled away, unwilling to be seen too close to him in the aftermath. His composure was back, fully restored, and he stood with his cane planted before him like a scepter. Up close, he was even more striking, the kind of face that belonged on a coin, all sharp lines and calculated elegance. A moment of your time, Malfoy said. In private. Bloodfang's hand went to his sword. Ironclaw shifted the leather case to his other hand, freeing his wand arm. Andromeda's eyes narrowed. Here is fine, Harry said. My associates can hear anything you have to say. Malfoy's grey eyes flicked to Bloodfang, to Ironclaw, to Andromeda, lingering on her with an expression of contempt so practiced it was almost art. Andromeda. How nice to see you found a new family to attach yourself to. Lucius. How nice to see you've lost the one you stole. Malfoy's jaw tightened. He turned back to Harry. You've made your point, Lord Potter. Publicly and dramatically. Well done. You have a gift for theater. Thank you. I practice in front of a mirror. But you should understand something. Malfoy took a step closer. His voice dropped, not threatening, exactly, but intimate. Confiding. The voice of a man who was about to offer wisdom to a child. The Wizengamot is not a stage. It is an arena. What you did today earned you attention. Attention is not the same as power. You have 3 seats and a great deal of gold. I have 30 years of relationships, alliances, favors owed and favors called. I have the minister's ear. I have the prophet's pen. You are a very clever little boy who made a very large splash, and tomorrow the water will settle, and I will still be here. Harry looked up at him. The height difference was absurd. Malfoy was well over 6 feet, Harry barely reached his chest. But Harry didn't tilt his head back. He didn't crane his neck. He just looked, and something in the way he did it made the height irrelevant. You're right, Harry said. You have 30 years of relationships. Built on black gold. Funded by black vaults. Authorized by a forged document that's now in the Wisengamot record. He watched that land. Watched the micro-expressions ripple across Malfoy's controlled face, fury, fear, calculation, before the mask reassembled. Every alliance you built with stolen money is a house of cards, Lord Malfoy. And I just pulled out the bottom card. Tomorrow the water will settle. And you'll still be here, answering questions about where the gold went. Harry held up his left hand, the black ring catching the magelight. Goblins are very patient accountants. They've tracked every canute. Would you like to know where the trail leads? Because I can promise you, the Wisengamot would. Malfoy stared at him. The mask held, but barely. Beneath it, Harry could see a man recalculating at furious speed, assessing threats, weighing options, mapping escape routes. Lucius Malfoy was many things, but stupid was not among them. He could see the ground shifting beneath him, and he was already planning where to plant his feet. You're making enemies, Lord Potter, Malfoy said softly. No. I'm identifying the ones I already have. Malfoy held his gaze for one more moment. Then he turned, robes swirling, and walked away down the corridor. His cane struck the floor in a precise, measured rhythm that didn't quicken, didn't falter. But his knuckles, wrapped around the silver serpent's head, were white. That man will try to destroy you, Andromeda said quietly, watching him go. He'll try, Harry agreed. He won't succeed. You sound very sure of that. I'm Lord Slytherin. If Lucius Malfoy wants to play serpent games, he should remember who the serpents actually belong to. The Floo deposited them back at Potter Manor as evening was falling. The oak trees were golden in the last light, and the wards wrapped around Harry like a warm blanket as he crossed the boundary. Mippy had dinner ready, roast chicken, potatoes, and a chocolate cake that was significantly larger than necessary. The elves had been following the Wisengamot session through the magical equivalent of a radio broadcast, and they were vibrating with excitement. Master Harry showed them, Mippy said, his enormous eyes bright. Master Harry showed them all. Harry ate dinner at the big table in the manor's dining hall, surrounded by portraits of Potters who kept interrupting to congratulate him. Charles was the loudest. That's my grandson. Did you see his face? Malfoy looked like he'd swallowed a live frog. But even the older, more reserved portraits were animated with something that looked like hope. After dinner, Harry retreated to his study. Ironclaw had left for Gringotts to begin the formal financial proceedings against Malfoy. Bloodfang was doing a perimeter check of the wards, because Bloodfang always did a perimeter check. Andromeda had fled home to Ted and Tonks. Harry was alone. And in the quiet, he did what he'd been putting off all day. He opened the Slytherin vault. Not physically, the physical vault was deep beneath Gringotts. But the ring connected him to it, and through the ring, he could access what was inside. It was a sensation like reaching into deep water, cold, dark, vast. The ring on his middle finger pulsed, and Harry felt Slytherin magic respond to his call, ancient and powerful and infinitely patient. He found what he was looking for almost immediately. Not gold. Not artifacts. A feeling, a resonance, like a string being plucked somewhere in the dark. Something in the Slytherin vault was calling to his scar. Harry closed his eyes and focused. The ring translated the sensation into something he could understand, images, impressions, a kind of magical sonar that mapped what was down there. He saw shelves of books in Parseltongue. He saw weapons that hummed with serpentine enchantments. He saw a portrait of a man with Slytherin's angular features and dark eyes, currently dormant but intact. And he saw, felt, the resonance that called to his scar. It wasn't in the vault. It was echoing from the vault, reflected like a sound bouncing off walls. The source was somewhere else. Somewhere connected to Slytherin's bloodline, to the magic that lived in the ring, to the fragment of something dark and broken that was lodged. Harry's eyes snapped open. His scar was burning. Not the dull ache he sometimes felt, but a sharp, focused pain, like a needle being driven into his forehead. And through the pain, he heard a voice. The same high, cold voice he'd heard when the binding blocks shattered, a scream of rage from something far away and not entirely alive. He pressed his hand to his scar and reached deeper. The Slytherin ring responded, its magic wrapping around the pain, analyzing it with the dispassionate precision of an ancient bloodline examining its own corruption. And there it was. A fragment. Tiny, dark, barbed, lodged in his scar like a splinter of obsidian embedded in flesh. It was alive. Not truly alive, not sentient, not conscious, but it had a presence, a will, a whisper of identity that Harry recognized from the histories Grimjaw had taught him. Voldemort. Not dead. Not fully. A piece of him, torn loose, perhaps, when the killing curse rebounded. A fragment of soul, parasitic, anchored to Harry's scar for 7 years. Feeding on his magic. Connected to whatever remained of the Dark Lord's shattered consciousness. Harry's first reaction was revulsion, a deep, visceral nausea at the idea that something of Voldemort had been living inside him. His second reaction was clinical, this was a problem, and problems had solutions. His third reaction, the one that surprised him, was satisfaction. Because this meant Voldemort wasn't gone. And if Voldemort wasn't gone, it meant the story wasn't over. It meant there was still something to fight. It meant all this preparation, the training, the politics, the alliances, wasn't just about reclaiming a stolen inheritance. It was about finishing what his parents had started. Harry reached for a piece of parchment and a quill. He wrote 2 words. Soul fragment. Then he wrote more, quickly, his handwriting sharper than usual. Everything he'd felt. Everything the ring had shown him. The nature of the fragment. Its location. Its connection to something larger, a network, the ring suggested, of similar fragments scattered across the wizarding world, each one an anchor holding Voldemort's spirit to the mortal plane. Horcruxes. The word surfaced from somewhere, the Slytherin ring again, ancestral memory, a concept so dark and forbidden that even Salazar himself had recorded it only in Parseltongue. The deliberate splitting of a soul through murder, each fragment hidden in an object, each object an insurance policy against death. Voldemort had made Horcruxes. More than one, the ring's magic suggested several, spread across locations of significance. And one of them was in Harry's forehead. Harry set down the quill. He looked at the parchment. Then he looked at his hands, 3 rings, 3 houses, 3 legacies. Potter courage. Black ferocity. Slytherin cunning. He picked up the quill again and wrote a note to Ragnarok. Director, I found something. Voldemort isn't dead, not entirely. There are soul anchors. The Slytherin ring calls them Horcruxes. I have one in my scar. There are others. I need the best curse breakers Gringotts has, and I need the Slytherin vault opened physically. There may be information inside that tells us where the others are. Also, I want the fragment in my scar removed. I don't care how painful it is. I don't care how dangerous. It comes out. This changes everything. But it also clarifies everything. We're not just fighting a political battle anymore. We're fighting a war, one that never actually ended. I'm ready. Harry he sealed the letter with the Potter crest and summoned Mippy, who took it with wide eyes and vanished to deliver it. Then Harry walked to the window. The manor grounds spread out before him in the moonlight, the lake a sheet of silver, the oaks dark sentinels along the drive, the distant mountains blue-gray against the stars. It was beautiful. It was his. All of it, the house, the land, the legacy, and beyond it, a world of magic and wonder and terrible danger that he was only beginning to understand. He was 8 years old. He had 3 lordships, a war to prepare for, and a fragment of the darkest wizard in history riding behind his scar. Harry grinned. It wasn't a happy grin, or not entirely. It was the grin of someone who has been handed an impossible challenge and has decided, with absolute clarity, to win. The grin of a boy who had survived a cupboard, survived binding blocks, survived a killing curse, and was now standing in his family home wearing his family rings with his family magic burning in his blood, looking out at a world that had tried to keep him small and failed. Voldemort was out there. Fragments of a monster, scattered and waiting. And Dumbledore was up there in his tower, scheming, recalculating, still convinced that he was the only one who could guide the wizarding world through what was coming. And Malfoy was in his manor, planning his counterattack, marshalling his resources, preparing to fight for the power he'd stolen. Let them plan. Let them scheme. Let them underestimate the skinny kid with the scar and the 3 rings. He'd walked into the Wizengamot and taken his seats. He'd faced down Dumbledore and Malfoy on the same day and come out standing. He'd discovered the darkest secret of the darkest wizard alive, and his first instinct hadn't been fear, it had been how do I fix this? Harry turned from the window. He had work to do. Letters to write, to Amelia Bones about the Black Trial, to the neutral Wizengamot members who'd shown support, to Ragnarok about the Horcruxes. Training to continue. Blood Fawn would have him running at dawn regardless of what had happened today. Books to read. A godfather to free. A school to reclaim. A dark lord to destroy for good. 3 years until Hogwarts. 3 years to prepare. 3 years to build alliances, grow his power, master his magic, and hunt down every last fragment of Voldemort's shattered soul. He was not going to Hogwarts as a student begging for entry. He was going as Lord Slytherin, one of the school's owners, a political force, a magical powerhouse, and the only person alive who knew the truth about Voldemort's immortality. And when he walked through those doors, it would not be with a tentative first-year's wonder. It would be with a conqueror's certainty. Harry sat down at his desk, pulled the first sheet of parchment toward him, and began to write. In the fireplace behind him, the flames burned green and gold, Potter and Slytherin, together, the colors of a legacy reborn. And on his fingers, 3 rings pulsed in quiet, synchronized harmony, their light steady and sure. The Lord had come home. The game had changed. And the serpent's throne had found its king.